The Charlotte Hornets. You think nothing of them. Why would you? They've only been utterly forgettable as a franchise for the strong majority of their existence. Both incarnations. They are a team with no direction. They're not building for the future, yet they aren't serious playoff contenders. They merely fill a vacuum of forgettability, once in a while showing up to get wrecked by real teams that aspire for more than 35 wins in a season. But mocking this isn't fun. I want to focus on one man in particular, the head honcho who was hyped to be North Carolina's great savior. This man was going to put the Hornets back on the map in style. Behold, the GOAT! Michael Jordan. There's nothing else that needs to be said. The aura behind that name lingers on to this day. He's the gold standard that today's stars are compared to. Yes, LeBron's great and all, but could he have competed in Jordan's era, they still cry? And to answer that, yes, he would have. Talent plays out in any era. However, I'm not here to talk about his playing days. There are thousands of videos already discussing that in detail. Let's dig into his time after the hardwood. Transport yourself back to 1998. Michael Jordan is finishing up what is to be his final season in Chicago. Air Jordan has nothing to prove on the court, but a new hunger fills his belly. The executive realm. Running a franchise. His airness has always felt he's been slighted by the fat cats at the top. Jerry Krause always held him back from his true potential. They wouldn't listen to his best player on personnel decisions. He felt voiceless. His ego wasn't being fed at every moment. That fucking toad did nothing but take credit for his hard work. Where could his next challenge be but in this position? Truly uncharted territory. He wouldn't only prove Krause wrong, he would be better than him in every facet of his job. It would take a year, but Jordan would finally have his chance in the executive branch. The Washington Wizards. The team was awful, deep in a tank for their next savior. It was perfect. He could make the mark of a dynasty that will bring him into the halls of immortality. Of course, even the Bulls weren't built in a day, so this would take time. The Wizards were clay and he would mold them into his own image. Rod Strickland was an injured liability, so he could kindly fuck off. Christian Laettner could thrive on this team, though. The package to get him included their best player in Juwan Howard, but that wasn't important. Jordan has a monumental moment coming up. The Wizards have won the lottery. They will get the first overall pick in the 2001 draft. The ways they could take their franchise are innumerable. Who does he take with this selection? Kwame Brown. A man who would only develop into one of the greatest memes of that decade. The next picks became Tyson Chandler and Pau Gasol. He whiffed. Not that he saw that coming, but the world was put into a frenzy as he would return to the court. Personally, I don't think he ever wanted to come out of retirement, but it was probably part of the stipulation for gaining control of team operations. They help you, you help them. Even with Jordan back on the court, the Wizards still lack that complementary piece to his legend. Jerry Stackhouse, there's a man who is worthy of feeding him. The price for such talent? Rep Hamilton, who would only go on to be a key contributor to the Pistons championship team in 2004. Even with his aging aura, Washington wouldn't go anywhere. Just mediocrity. Off the court, he would do nothing but shit on the team and the players he brought in. It was all of the ego, but with declining talent. Once he retired for the final time, the Wizards told him to leave and never return. He had felt betrayed again. He did nothing wrong in his eyes. Even though if you look at his transactions, he sucked. He tried to compete but failed miserably. He botched his draft choices. He set the team back years with his moves. He made the team about him. It was justified as he had failed as an executive, but Michael disagreed. He didn't get enough time, he thought. Not to say Washington would be smart. The Wizards would replace Air Jordan with Ernie Grunfeld, which is a punishment they would feel for 15 years. Not exactly freedom. Despite this setback, Michael wanted another chance. He was slighted in Washington. A new opportunity needed the guarantee he wouldn't be merely used as a toy to bring fans to the arena. How about Charlotte? They're a terrible team as well. Struggling to find an identity of their own after becoming a new expansion team? It'll be like the old days with him as a Tar Heel. Number 23 coming home. People will love it. A face like Michael will only bring attention to this franchise. This time, though, he'll become an owner. He will buy a minority stake in the team on one condition. He gets complete control of basketball operations. He won't be fired like he did in Washington this time. He would get all the time he would need. They had the third overall pick to play with in 2006, another chance at molding the clay. Who would the Bobcats pick in his first draft at the helm? Adam Morrison. He was often injured and terrible to rest. Now, there will never be confirmation if Jordan had any say in who was drafted that year. His power grab had just become official, and he would never dare admit he was wrong about a decision. That would only be giving Jerry Krause credibility. He still had a chip on his shoulder about that situation, you know. Him admitting fault would merely be saying that his naysayers had won. Why do you think he rarely talks about the Hornets these days? That would be opening him up for criticism. Let me play spoiler for a second. His tenure with Charlotte has been absolutely embarrassing to claim as one's own. Are you ready for a whirlwind of awful moves? Because it's turning like one of Jordan's windmills. Years upon years of bad trades and bad drafting. In 2008, Charlotte would pick DJ Augustine with the 9th pick. Who was selected immediately after? Brook Lopez. 3 years later, they would want a franchise-altering center. They would move heaven and earth, including Steven Jackson and Sean Livingston, to move up to select one man. Bismack Biyombo. He sucked and was gone in 4 years. The first-round pick they also gave up for such a prize? Tobias Harris. The next year, they were awful but lost the lottery to New Orleans. With the second overall pick, they'd select Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who would develop into nothing. What did they pass up on? Bradley Beal. In 2015, the Boston Celtics were desperate to get their hands on Justice Winslow. They would offer Charlotte 4 first-round picks to select him 9th overall. This could have possibly included first-round choices from the Brooklyn Nets, and those could be potential lottery picks. But Jordan personally would refuse such an offer. Who did they hold out for? Frank Kaminsky, who would unsurprisingly do nothing in Charlotte. 2017 had the same thing happen. Head coach Steve Clifford was begging them to pick a budding prospect, but they dismissed his pleas. They would pick a flop in Malik Monk instead. Who did Clifford pound the pavement for? Donovan Mitchell. How about the year before, where they traded a late first-rounder for Marco Bellinelli? He'd be gone in a year, but who would they have picked if they didn't get him? Pascal Siakam. Not so easy, is it, Michael? Wait, I'm being too judgmental. What about his decisions away from the draft? How about trading assets, including a first-round pick in 2014 for Tyrese Thomas? Decent backup big man? Not a big deal, you say, but what ended up becoming of that pick? Yusuf Nurkic. How about trading Corey Maggette for Ben Gordon in a first-round pick that same year? Charlotte even got an earlier pick than the one they traded to Chicago. They pissed it away on Noah Vonleh. Gerald Wallace was good for a bit, before he was traded for a mere pittance of his talent. Remember when they brought in Dwight Howard, and then realized he was a cancer and traded him away for an anchor contract? Marvin Williams is decent, so why not grossly overpay him to force him to stay in this hellhole? It's at this point where one would suspect that Jordan is afraid of failure. He doesn't want to tank, even though his efforts have mostly failed miserably to this point, because he still has to prove that he's better than Jerry Krause. Look at the 2016 NBA free agent class. The salary cap is rising exponentially. Despite everyone playing eons over their heads and making the playoffs, it would be wise for the Hornets to sit this one out. Even if Nick Batum had a solid year in Charlotte, he would be grossly overpaid on the market like everyone else. He's useful, but signing him wouldn't make them a true contender. Hold on, just give me 1 second.
I'm about to bust. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was the bathroom. Oh, good Lord!
Insanity. $24 million a year for Nick Batum?
Now look, I'm not saying Batum is a scrub. He's a decent role player and swingman, but you overpaid him by at least $10 million per year. You gave him as big of a contract as Harrison Barnes. And that guy was a key contributor to a championship team. Am I supposed to be shocked that his career year was just that? An abnormality. Batum hasn't just flopped, he's become a black hole, which is an unbelievably terrible investment for what is a budget that most businesses would dream for. Don't even ask how he's doing this year, it'll have you begging for NFL-style deals. This leads to the current situation, where the Hornets are locked into a bevy of awful contracts, including that of Kidd-Gilchrist, the second coming of Bismack Biyombo, Marvin Williams, Tyler Zeller, and one Nick Batum. Who does this end up hurting? Kemba Walker. You don't think he's good enough to be the face of your franchise, even though he's been that for years. The Hornets stumbled onto him at the draft and have been reaping the rewards of wasting his talent. He's carried this team through thick and thin, and you rewarded him by insulting his very being. Kemba's been the best player this organization has ever had. And you fucking lowballed him. Am I supposed to be surprised that he went to a team that appreciated his services? You lost him for next to nothing. You'd think that the Hornets would try to reassess their situation, perhaps tank for a chance at a top draft pick, but you don't know Michael. He's afraid of failure. He wants a piece of flesh in return for Kemba. How about a downgrade in Terry Rozier and an overpayment? Look, Charlotte, they won in the end. Aren't you excited for Hornets basketball? You aren't? Well, you should be, with being locked into a cell with those terrible deals they've signed. Now, here's the one thing I have never understood about this whole situation. As a player, Michael Jordan was about greatness. He never settled on anything less than the best for both himself and his teammates. His drive and hunger were legendary. Nowadays, as an owner, he's grown eager to suck on mediocrity's complacent teat. It's not just that he drafts and develops poorly, but like his gambling habit, he triples down on these terrible players and locks them into gross overpayments. He builds the Hornets to be competitive, not a true contender. A perennial 10th place finish in a weak Eastern Conference. This is what Jordan's legacy has fallen to. He's afraid to suck, so he's settling for being forgettable. His time as an executive has flopped harder than a stint in baseball. At least that was temporary. Just like in Birmingham, all he does is strike out, and he will continue to for the foreseeable future. Jerry Krause only laughs up above at his inability to convert his skills to this level. One more thing, LeBron, I hope you're paying attention because this is your future.
In the mid-2000s, the NBA expanded the league by adding a team to Charlotte to replace the franchise that just relocated to New Orleans, thus birthing the Charlotte Bobcats. Now, just like most new franchises, of course, you had your struggles, your ups and downs. However, when it comes to the Charlotte Bobcats / Hornets, this is an organization that has struggled significantly over the past 15 years. So much so that it's actually concerning, because if you know anything about the NBA, there are several ways that a team can systematically change their fortune. So personally, when I see a franchise like Charlotte be as bad as it has been for the past 10 to 15 years, of course, some eyebrows have to be raised. And while doing research, I had to figure out what exactly has this organization done with all of their draft picks. Because since 2004, the Charlotte Bobcats / Hornets have had over 20 first-round picks, 10 of which have been top 10 selections. So how is it that this organization has been struggling this much for this long? So first we begin in the infamous 2006 draft, and after a terrible regular season from the Charlotte Bobcats, they are awarded with the 3rd overall pick, and with it they decided to select Adam Morrison, a 6'8" forward out of Gonzaga who was coming off of such an impressive junior year that he was drawing comparisons to Larry Bird. Yes, the Larry Bird. Unfortunately, not only did Morrison fall extremely short from those expectations, but also he was out of the league just 4 years later, making him one of the biggest busts in recent memory. But even with that title, it's still really hard to be hypercritical of this draft selection, because looking at what was available after Adam Morrison, the 2006 draft, just to be honest with you, really wasn't that talented. Being realistic, the two best options that were still available for the Bobcats were either Rudy Gay, who was a fringe all-star, and Brandon Roy, who had superstar potential but was never able to fulfill it thanks to injuries that he sustained all throughout his career. So yes, a bust, but a very explainable draft pick in my opinion. And a very similar sentiment honestly can be had for next year's draft class as well, because thanks to a trade that occurred a few months prior, as well as another really bad season, the Charlotte Bobcats went into the 2007 draft with 2 first-round picks, the later one being a 22nd overall pick, and with it they decided to draft Jared Dudley. Now, I could nitpick this selection and point out that Wilson Chandler was still available. However, Jared Dudley is a solid role player who's had a very long career in the NBA, and finding that type of value that late in the first round is pretty impressive, so I'm not going to really nitpick it. And then when it comes to the top pick, the Charlotte Bobcats owned the 8th overall selection. With it, they decided to draft Brandon Wright, who they traded immediately on draft night to the Golden State Warriors. Now, one could be critical and point out the fact that Joakim Noah was still available, who at his peak was an elite level defender who won Defensive Player of the Year. However, putting things into context, at the time, the Bobcats believed that Emeka Okafor was going to be their franchise player, especially since he was coming off of the best season of his career. Furthermore, Charlotte received some pretty valuable assets in return for Brandon Wright and Jamario Davidson and Jason Richardson. But in 2008, it's a different story. Again, thanks to a trade as well as another bad season, the Charlotte Bobcats entered the draft with 2 first-rounders. The first one being a 9th overall pick, and the front office was divided on who they should select. On one hand, you had some execs who believed that they should draft Brook Lopez, as Lopez was more of a scoring big and Okafor was able to counterbalance that with his defensive presence. But then on the other hand, you had some people in the front office believing that they should draft DJ Augustin, the loudest person in this bunch being Larry Brown, who was the head coach for the Charlotte Bobcats at the time. And he would get his way, as the Bobcats would draft the 5'11" point guard with the 9th overall pick in 2008. Unfortunately, this didn't work out for the organization, as Augustin turned out to be a bench player, while Brook Lopez at his peak was an all-star, and is still relevant in today's league as he has evolved his game to be more of a floor spacer. But wait, it gets worse. because later on the draft night, the Charlotte Bobcats decided to trade their 2010 first round pick to receive the 20th overall pick. The reason for this is because they believed that Agensa was too good to pass up on. The problem with this, though, is not only did they just give up a first round pick, as well as Agensa being a mediocre player in the NBA, but also all of the players who were selected immediately after, such as Ryan Anderson, George Hill, Nicholas Batum, and Serge Ibaka, not only turned out to be better players, but also would have been better fits for the roster. Moving on to the 2009 draft, and even though the Bobcats have seen some improvement, it's still not enough to take them out of the lottery. So with the 12th overall pick, the Bobcats decided to draft Gerald Henderson, a 6'5" shooting guard who should provide some floor spacing that is desperately needed on his team, but never really panned out to be nothing more than just a solid backup. But to be fair, looking at some of the other players who were drafted right after, such as Tyler Hansbrough, Earl Clark, and Austin Day, honestly, Henderson might have actually been the best available prospect for the Bobcats. Luckily, by the end of the 2010 season, the Bobcats were a playoff team, so the pick that they traded to position themselves to draft Agensa really didn't turn out to be that valuable. And actually, it was the 16th overall pick, and with it, the Minnesota Timberwolves decided to select Luke Babbitt. However, within the next year, some huge changes would occur with the roster, because in the middle of the 2010-2011 season, it was clear that the Bobcats had capped out, and their ceiling was, at best, a first-round exit. Because of this, they decided to part ways with Gerald Wallace, who at the time was undeniably the best player on their team, and traded him to the Portland Trail Blazers, and in return received some valuable assets, the two most noteworthy ones being 2 first-round picks, one in 2011 and one in 2014. So now entering the 2011 draft, the Bobcats have 2 first-rounders. The first one, they decided to select Kemba Walker, who had a somewhat slow start in the NBA, but really turned around his career in the last 5 seasons and has become a perennial all-star, made an all-NBA team, and for what it's worth, he was the face of the franchise in Charlotte. And with the second first-round pick that the Bobcats again received during the Gerald Wallace trade, Charlotte decided to draft Tobias Harris, who has turned out to be a fringe all-star in the NBA, or at worst, an above-average starter in this league. Unfortunately, though, the progress that was seen from Harris to get to that point wasn't while he was wearing a Bobcats jersey, because Charlotte decided to trade him on draft night to the Milwaukee Bucks as a part of a 3-team trade. In return, Charlotte would receive Corey Maggette and Bismack Biyombo, who was the 7th overall pick in the same draft class. Unfortunately, though, neither one of those players were able to come close to what Tobias Harris was able to produce in the upcoming years. But honestly, that wasn't Charlotte's main concern, because during that trade, the Bobcats also lost Steven Jackson, who was the second best player on the team by far, and the reason why they wanted to do this is to tank for a potentially generational talented player in Anthony Davis in the upcoming draft. The result of this was a 7-win season from the 2011-2012 Charlotte Bobcats, making them not only the worst team in franchise history, but also one of the worst teams the league has ever offered. So why didn't Charlotte draft Anthony Davis? Well, it's because they lost the lottery. Yes, even though Charlotte had one of the worst records in NBA history, they still lost the lottery to New Orleans and only received the 2nd overall pick. And with it, in the 2012 draft, they decided to select Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who had some potential entering the NBA with his athleticism hopefully transitioning to elite level defense, but that never transpired, and honestly, he has turned out to be one of the biggest busts that the league has seen due to his inability to space out the floor. To make matters worse, there were an abundance of talented players that were still available, such as Andre Drummond, Harrison Barnes, and Bradley Beal, that would have been great fits alongside the young roster that Charlotte was attempting to build at the time. Next, we have the 2013 draft, and thanks to another mediocre season from the Bobcats, they have yet again another top 5 draft pick at their disposal. With it, they decided to go with Cody Zeller, a 7-foot big man out of Indiana, who honestly hasn't really panned out to be anything special in this league. However, to be fair, when it comes to the 2013 draft class, it is a bit weird to try to project how some of these players are going to pan out to be. So even though, yes, sure, Giannis was still available, at the time, no one really expected Giannis to turn out to be the type of player he is today. So me expecting him to be drafted with a top 4 pick is a bit excessive. But then again, you still have some floor spaces out there, such as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and CJ McCollum, but I will give some slack to Charlotte this time just because how weird the talent structure was in 2013. But I cannot do that for 2014, as the 2014 draft class was viewed as potentially one of the most talented classes the league has ever offered. And this time, Charlotte had 2 first rounders, again thanks to the Gerald Wallace trade that gave them the 24th overall selection, and they also had the 9th overall pick as well. Now, let's pause for a second and let's look at the roster so you can understand how bad of a selection Charlotte makes with the 9th overall pick. In last year's offseason, the Charlotte Bobcats decided to sign Al Jefferson, who is a big man who cannot space out the floor, but is definitely a key component to this team's success so far. Also, be very mindful that this team just drafted Cody Zeller, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and traded Tobias Harris for Bismack Biyombo. So it's very clear that the front court has more than enough players, and if you're going to add someone in the front court, it definitely needs to be someone who has the ability to space out the floor. So with the 9th overall pick, who do the Charlotte Bobcats select? Noah Vonleh, a 6'10" big man out of Indiana who cannot space out the floor, even though players such as Dario Saric, TJ Warren, and Zach LaVine are all still available. But wait, it still gets worse, because with the 24th overall pick, again that they received from the Gerald Wallace trade from Portland, Charlotte decided to go with Shabazz Napier, but then traded him on draft night to Miami for PJ Harrison. Now, neither one of these players have turned out to be anything special. However, still available on the draft board was Bogdan Bogdanovic, who has turned out to be a quality player in the NBA who has the ability to space out the floor, something that this team desperately needs. But wait, it still gets worse, because during the 2015 draft, and I'm being very serious when I say this, the Charlotte Hornets do something so negligible that I'm actually flabbergasted how poorly mismanaged this asset is when it comes with the 9th overall selection. So again, Charlotte has a mediocre season, receives a lottery pick, and it turns out to be the 9th overall selection. Now let's all pause for a second and put things into context here. Charlotte just got done drafting Noah Vonleh, Cody Zeller, Tobias Harris, and trading him for Bismack Biyombo, as well as Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, and also 2 summers ago signed Al Jefferson. So again, the front court is filled with players who cannot space out the floor. Furthermore, the backcourt is looking a bit suspect, as Gerald Henderson hasn't really panned out to be the starting caliber player that they all hoped he would become. So you would assume that this is a team that will go after a shooting guard, or at least someone who can help space out the floor. But no, because for the 3rd straight season, the Hornets decided to draft another big man who cannot space out the floor in Frank Kaminsky, who has not only turned out to be a mediocre player at best, but also looking at some of the other players that were still available, such as Justice Winslow, Miles Turner, and Devin Booker. Yeah, just a terrible decision from Charlotte. But wait, it still gets much worse, because before the draft, Danny Ainge, general manager for the Boston Celtics, offered a trade package to Charlotte that quite honestly should have been unrefusable, as Ainge was willing to give up 4 first-round picks for the 9th overall selection. Now, how valuable were these draft picks? Well, 2 of them were going to be in the same draft class and turned out to be the 15th and 16th overall pick, which turned out to be Kelly Oubre and Terry Rozier. Another pick was going to be a future Minnesota Timberwolves or Memphis Grizzlies pick. And then finally, the Hornets would have the ability to pick one of the 2 future Brooklyn Nets pick, which at the time was one of the most valuable draft picks that were available, as everyone knew the Brooklyn Nets were going to be one of the worst teams in the NBA, which meant that those picks were going to translate to one of the top 3 picks in the upcoming drafts. But wait, it still somehow gets worse, because when prompted the question on why exactly the organization declined the offer, Hornets Vice Chairman Curtis Polk argued that having those extra picks would have created a roster crunch after acquiring players such as Nicholas Batum, Spencer Hawes, and Jeremy Lamb during draft night. Mind you, that this is a team that has an abundance of big men and just drafted another big man in Frank Kaminsky. So all of a sudden, a roster crunch is a problem? Just doesn't make any sense to me. But then he continues by saying, and I quote, "Even if someone wants to give me first round picks, what am I going to do with them?" So after the 2016 season, the Hornets make the playoffs and they receive the 22nd overall pick, draft Malachi Richardson, but then trade him to the Sacramento Kings for Marco Bellinelli. Nothing really extravagant there. But then after the 2017 season, the Charlotte Hornets are back to being a mediocre, subpar, non-playoff team, so they received the 11th overall pick. And mind you, during the lottery, the Brooklyn Nets pick that they potentially could have had turned out to be the first overall pick. With it, the Boston Celtics decided to trade down with the Philadelphia 76ers and draft Jason Tatum with the 3rd overall selection, a move that the Charlotte Hornets clearly could have done since, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist really hasn't panned out and his team still needs some floor spacing. However, Charlotte still has the 11th overall pick. So who did they select with it? Malik Monk, who was supposed to come into the NBA as an explosive combo guard who had the ability to space out the floor and finish strong at the rim. However, his career really hasn't panned out for various reasons, and some of the players that were still available on the board, such as Luke Kennard and Donovan Mitchell, who also played a shooting guard position, would have been better fits for this team. And then finally, we got the 2018 draft, and after another mediocre season, the Hornets have another lottery pick, and with it, they decide to select Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's turned out to be a really good player in this league who has a lot of promise and upside, and in my opinion, at bare minimum, he will be an all-star in this league. Unfortunately, none of that promise will be seen in Charlotte as the Hornets decided to trade him on draft night to the Los Angeles Clippers and in return receive Miles Bridges, who also shows some potential, but not to the same level as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. To make it even worse, this is an organization that knew for a fact within a year's time they had to make a decision on Kemba Walker, and when they made that decision, they didn't even offer him a max contract and basically allowed him to walk in free agency. So instead of just drafting and keeping Kemba Walker's successor and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, they decided to just let both of them walk, and the two players that they received in return, again, is Miles Bridges and Terry Rozier. Just doesn't make any sense, people, whatsoever. And quite honestly, that is a huge reason why I don't believe in this whole concept of small markets being at this unfair or massive disadvantage. To a certain extent, there is some validity to that argument. However, when you go back and you look at a lot of the decisions that a team like Charlotte has made over the past 15 years, it is undeniable the amount of talent, potential trades, and assets. I really don't feel sorry that this is an organization that has struggled this much for this long.
Charlotte Hornets franchise has been around for 30 years, but it hasn't experienced any success. Exactly 20 years ago was the last time this franchise won at least 50 regular season games, and currently the team also owns the title of the worst season in NBA history by winning percentage, with only 7 wins in 66 games in the lockout-shortened 2011-2012 season. But the history isn't all bad. The franchise has made the playoffs 10 times, and the greatest player of all time is now the owner of the franchise. It all started in 1985, when the NBA announced that it plans to expand the league by 3 teams. One of the possible expansion teams was Charlotte. An entrepreneur, George Shinn, wanted to have an NBA team in Charlotte area, and one of the biggest reasons for having a team in Charlotte was the Charlotte Coliseum, which could fit 24,000 spectators, the largest arena for an NBA team. On April 5, 1987, David Stern called Shinn to tell that Charlotte will participate in the upcoming 1988-89 NBA season. The planning process started. The team was supposed to be named Charlotte Spirit, but after a name-the-team contest, it was called the Charlotte Hornets. The team chose teal as its primary color and had pinstripes on uniform, which at that time was something new. One thing wasn't right from the start though. Instead of investing into young players, team owner decided to go the other route by acquiring veterans to make the team competitive from day one. The 1988-89 season was a failure, only 20 wins and 62 losses. The best players on the team were veterans, Kelly Tripucka, Kurt Rambis, and Rex Chapman. Next season was even worse. Charlotte managed to win only 19 games, but never mind the worst record, there were some positives. Youngsters, both 25 at the time, Muggsy Bogues and Del Curry, started to play more and produce more. Curry was averaging cool 16 points per game as a bench player, and Muggsy Bogues was averaging almost 11 assists per game as a super undersized point guard. In 1990-91 season, the team saw a minor improvement by winning 26 games, But the best decision came in the 1991 NBA draft, when Charlotte Hornets drafted power forward Larry Johnson with the first pick of that draft class. For the next 5 years, Johnson would become the cornerstone of the Charlotte Hornets franchise. With Larry Johnson averaging a double-double, Charlotte Hornets were better, but not quite a playoff team yet. 31 wins on the season, best season to date, but no playoffs. But then, they once again nailed the draft, as with the second overall pick, they took Alonzo Mourning. Charlotte now had an all-star frontcourt, an undersized but very good passer in Muggsy Bogues, an up-and-coming shooting guard in Kendall Gill, and a sixth man of the year candidate in Del Curry. The team finally looked like a good team, and the most important thing was that each of the core players was young. 1992-93 season was the first season the Charlotte Hornets franchise made the playoffs. They had their best regular season with 44 wins and even made all the way to the conference semifinals, where they lost to the New York Knicks. Next season, Charlotte was battling with injuries to their top stars in Mourning and Johnson. Subsequently, they won 41 games on the season and narrowly missed the playoffs. Charlotte bounced back in a big way for the 1994-95 season, as they won 50 games in the regular season, but failed in the playoffs, losing in the first round to the Chicago Bulls in 4 games. After the season, Charlotte shocked the basketball world by trading their best player and franchise face Alonzo Mourning to the Miami Heat for Glenn Rice, Matt Geiger, and Khalid Reeves. Surprises continued at the beginning of the 1995-96 season as well. One of the most popular players, Muggsy Bogues, got injured just 6 games into the season, and before the trade deadline, the recently acquired Khalid Reeves and Kendall Gill were traded for an all-star guard, Kenny Anderson. While all acquired players made contributions, the overhauling of the team left its mark. They won only 41 games and missed the playoffs once again. Kenny Anderson declined the extension, and Charlotte was about to start everything over again. They traded away their star in Larry Johnson for power forward Anthony Mason. That worked out. They also acquired Vlade Divac from the Los Angeles Lakers for the rights to rookie Kobe Bryant. That obviously didn't work out, as Kobe went on to become one of the greatest players in NBA history, while Vlade Divac was just a solid piece. But never mind the Kobe fail, Charlotte did have its best season as a franchise. They won 54 regular season games. Anthony Mason turned out to be a great addition. Glenn Rice was scoring almost 27 points per game. Vlade Divac was solid with 12 points and 9 rebounds per game. Muggsy was healthy, and Del Curry still was scoring off the bench. Once again though, Hornets failed in the playoffs. A first round loss in 3 games against the New York Knicks. 1997-98 season started with a bang, as Hornets traded one of their original faces of the team, Muggsy Bogues, just 2 games into season. In exchange, they got point guard David Wesley and Bobby Phills. With the new starting lineup and some great play from Glenn Rice and Anthony Mason, Charlotte Hornets won 51 games, making back-to-back trips to postseason. This time, they went as far as the second round of the playoffs, where they lost to the Chicago Bulls. In a lockout-shortened 50-game season of 1998-99, Hornets traded their star Glenn Rice to the Lakers and managed to win 26 games, but failed to make the playoffs. For the next 3 years, Hornets would make the playoffs, but get eliminated in the first or second round, and because of the low attendance numbers, it was decided to move the team to New Orleans. The part of the deal though was that Charlotte would get a new team 2 years later. For the next few years in New Orleans, the new team would make the playoffs, but get eliminated rather quickly in the first or the second round. As promised, Charlotte got back their team in 2004. The new team would be named the Charlotte Bobcats, and in the 2004 expansion draft, Charlotte selected Gerald Wallace, Primoz Brezec, and Jason Kapono. With the acquired second pick of the 2004 NBA draft, Charlotte selected Emeka Okafor. The new team was ready. Well, at least on paper they were. The season turned out to be the worst in franchise history, with only 18 wins in 82 games. All Charlotte had was some solid players, but no superstars. Emeka Okafor, however, won the Rookie of the Year award, averaging 15 points and 10 rebounds. In the 2005 draft, the Bobcats chose Raymond Felton and Sean May. The team improved just slightly and finished the season with 26 wins. After the season, Charlotte got some media attention when one of the greatest basketball players ever, Michael Jordan, bought a minority stake of the team. The greatest player ever couldn't deliver the success to the team, and even acquiring Larry Brown as the head coach didn't help. For the next 3 years, the team would see only minor improvements, but mostly it was stagnancy and missing the playoffs. The best the team could achieve was 35 wins in 2008-2009 season, and that was it. During the 2009-2010 season, Jordan became the first former NBA player to own the majority of a franchise. The move maybe somewhat encouraged Charlotte's players, and the team got to the playoffs again by winning 44 games in the regular season. It was a short trip though, a loss in the first round. Next 3 seasons were a wash. After a bad start to the 2010-2011 season, head coach Larry Brown was fired. Paul Silas didn't do much better, and the season ended with 34 wins. And then came the worst season in NBA history, where the Charlotte Bobcats won only 7 games, and up to this day hold the worst regular season winning percentage in NBA history. And the 2012-2013 season wasn't much better, with only 21 wins. Once again, Charlotte was changing head coaches, and this time it was Steve Clifford who got the gig. The move proved to be a good one, as Charlotte made the playoffs with 43 wins, but the most of the success definitely was because of the better talent. Kemba Walker, Al Jefferson, Gerald Henderson, and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. No superstars, but definitely better than what they had before. The playoffs were once again short, a loss in the first round. But some changes were coming. Before the 2013-2014 season, Jordan submitted a request to rename the team back to Charlotte Hornets, and the move was approved. For the next 4 years, back as the Charlotte Hornets, the team would be a borderline playoff team, but nothing more. Only 1 playoff appearance in 4 years and no draft games. This year, Charlotte Hornets are actually playing good, and one of their stars is playing great. Yes, I'm talking about Kemba Walker, who has been a fabulous player this season. But let's also remember that he's a free agent after the season, so what happens if he leaves? Michael Jordan hasn't converted his greatness as a basketball player into a great manager and owner, yet. Charlotte Hornets have some good pieces, but when will we see some real improvements? In my opinion, Kemba has to stay. Right now, he's the only marketable star in Charlotte. They also need to draft better. Besides the Kemba Walker pick in 2011, they have nothing to show for their draft success. The Charlotte Hornets franchise currently has the 5th worst all-time record in NBA history, with 988 wins and 1,260 losses. The Charlotte Hornets have only a 44% winning percentage. Can it get better? Can Michael Jordan bring success to Charlotte? I think there are positive signs. Bringing in an experienced basketball mind in Mitch Kupchak helps. You have a possible superstar on your team in Kemba Walker. All you have to do is draft better and win more. Sounds easy. What do you think, guys? Can Charlotte Hornets finally be better than a middle-of-the-pack team? What will it take for the franchise to finally achieve something greater than a first-round playoff exit?
The 1973 Philadelphia 76ers used to own the record for the worst winning percentage in NBA history, but they moved back a spot in 2012 when the Charlotte Bobcats finished the lockout season with 7 wins and 59 losses. When you just take a quick look at the roster, you can see why they were going to be a bad team. It was a combination of inexperienced players and guys who should not be number 1 options being placed in a situation where they are the go-to scorer. Guys like Byron Mullins, Derek Brown, DJ White, Tyrese Thomas, and Boris Diaw were big rotation pieces for them, and they were banking on a 21-year-old Kemba Walker and Bismack Biyombo to breathe new life into the franchise. So how bad were the Charlotte Bobcats statistically? Well, for one, they were the NBA's worst scoring offense. They scored just 95 points per 100 possessions that year. They were the only team in the league to be below 100. Everyone else passed the 100 mark except the Bobcats. Charlotte just did not have any accurate shooters anywhere on the roster. They finished last in 3-point percentage. That Bobcats team was the only team in the league to shoot below 30% at the 3-point line. All other 29 NBA teams were able to get above it except them. And to no surprise, they also had the league's worst defense, giving up 110 points per 100 possessions. The whole season was a low point, but the lowest point came after All-Star break, when Charlotte closed the season with a 23-game losing streak, which is the third longest losing streak in NBA history. 21 of their losses were by 20 points, and 9 of their losses were 30-plus point blowouts. And when other teams were dealing with injuries, they could not take advantage of a game that they could possibly win. The New Orleans Hornets, this was their first year without Chris Paul. They beat the Bobcats in one of the final games of the year by 8 points, without their leading scorer Eric Gordon and second leading rebounder Chris Kaman. In the last game of the regular season against the Knicks, Michael Jordan was in his private box high above the court. This was unusual because MJ usually sat at the end of the Bobcats bench for the home games, but not this time. When the scoreboard operator showed a video of Michael Jordan standing in the box on the Jumbotron, there was not cheers for the 6-time Finals MVP in the final home game. MJ was met with loud boos from the home crowd. Knicks point guard Baron Davis said in a post-game interview that he was shocked to hear MJ get booed at a home game. Baron said, "Do you think that's ever happened to MJ at his home court? There's no way, right?" This was the reality of Michael Jordan's current situation. The GOAT NBA player was now considered the worst NBA executive. When MJ was asked in the 2012 summer about Charlotte owning the worst winning percentage ever in NBA history, Jordan kept it really brief. He said, "Obviously, I'm a competitor. I never want to be in the record books for failure." Jordan was getting a lot of criticism for his current mistakes and his past mistakes. Drafting Adam Morrison did not work out, and they also traded away a first-round pick to get Tyrese Thomas, who contributed pretty much nothing for the team. Charlotte caught a lot of heat from die-hard Bobcats fans, but elsewhere, fans were clowning the team for how comically bad they were. Jokes about the 7-win Bobcats team were everywhere on social media. Point guard DJ Augustine said this to the media about the jokes: "Many people are laughing at us and making the streak as a joke, but we take it very seriously. We are just trying to stay positive and play hard until the end." Charlotte Bobcats head coach Paul Silas coached his final NBA game in 2012, and he said this: "The season itself was a long haul for all of us, upstairs and downstairs. Being the worst team in the history of the game is not something you cherish." This part is not too surprising, but it's definitely interesting. There are only 3 players left from that Bobcats team in 2012 that are still in the NBA, and that's Kemba Walker, Bismack Biyombo, and DJ Augustine. Here's what the other players on the team are up to right now. Derek Brown, a 6'7" small forward, he was actually one of the more productive players on the team. He's playing ball in Turkey. Gerald Henderson, he played in 2016 with the Sixers, but he is a free agent right now and is out for the whole year because of hip surgery. Boris Diaw is back home in France playing pro basketball there. Corey Maggette retired at the end of the 2014 season with the Detroit Pistons. Jamario Moon has been out of the league since 2012. Corey Higgins is playing basketball in Russia right now. Byron Mullins' last NBA team was the Sixers in 2014. Reggie Williams played for the Pelicans a little bit last year and is now in Russia. Matt Carroll retired the next season in 2012. DJ White is playing in Turkey. Tyrese Thomas, the number 4 overall pick of the 2006 draft, has been out of the league since 2015 with Memphis. Sagana Diop, his last year in the league was in 2013. And that is the story of the NBA team with the worst winning percentage of all time, the 2011-2012 Charlotte Bobcats. Definitely a horrible team, the worst offense, the worst defense, they couldn't shoot threes, just a really miserable team to watch.
The history between the Charlotte Hornets and the New Orleans Pelicans is kinda hard to understand, but their histories are intertwined. The Charlotte Hornets we know today, the team owned by MJ, is not the same franchise we knew in the past. You know, back in the days of Alonzo Mourning, Muggsy Bogues, and Larry Johnson, or even Baron Davis and Jamal Mashburn. They played for the original Charlotte Hornets. This team was created in 1988 by its original founder, George Shinn. Eventually, in 2002, this team would relocate to New Orleans, bringing along their entire history and roster with them, and became the New Orleans Hornets. A few years later in 2004, the Charlotte Bobcats, a brand new franchise, a new expansion team, was created. At this time, the Bobcats were recognized as a brand new team with no history whatsoever. However, that's when it gets messy. In 2013, the New Orleans Hornets, who were the true continuation of the original Charlotte Hornets, changed their name to the New Orleans Pelicans. Then, a year later, the Charlotte Bobcats changed their name to the Charlotte Hornets. They also negotiated a deal with the Pelicans to reclaim the history of the original Charlotte Hornets, the one from 1988 to 2002, before they relocated to New Orleans. Yeah, I know, it's kinda weird. However, in this video, let's take a look at why the original Charlotte Hornets relocated to New Orleans in the first place. What prompted them to make this move? 'Cause if you think about it, the circumstances were very strange. 2 years after their relocation, a new Charlotte team popped up in the same area. That was the Bobcats. So even though the city lost their team, they got it back very quickly. Was this all planned from the start? What happened? So where do we start? First, let's go back to 2002. This was the last year the original Charlotte Hornets played in Charlotte, before relocating. The situations surrounding the move were complicated, to say the least. But let's first take a look at the team itself. They just won 44 games and reached the Eastern Conference semifinals. They had 2 all-star caliber players, Baron Davis and Jamal Mashburn, and a very solid roster from top to bottom. Right before relocating, the team was a legitimate playoff team, a competent one too. That's very rare to see. Typically when any team relocates, it's cause they're usually really bad and they need a change of scenery. That's not the case for the Hornets. They were pretty damn good, and yet still not good enough to grab the attention of fans. Despite being the 4th seed of the Eastern Conference, the Hornets had the lowest attendance in the entire league, with an average of just 11,000 fans attending their home games. That's brutal. And considering Charlotte is a small market city, they were operating on significant losses. They just weren't generating enough revenue. The key person in this has always been George Shinn, the owner. Ever since he founded the team, he was trying to move the team elsewhere, to the dismay of fans. Even back in 1990, shortly after he created the franchise, a newspaper excerpt wrote about Shinn's desire to move the city to South Carolina, of all places. Really, South Carolina? Shinn wanted a very favorable lease to play in Charlotte Coliseum, but the owners of the stadium felt like he was being too cheap. Shinn would renew the lease year after year, and if they were charging too much for the team to play there, then he threatened to move the team out of Charlotte. An authority member of Charlotte Coliseum stated, "George Shinn is a greedy, selfish man." And he really hated how he was trying to get so much leverage. By the late 90s, he even tried to get the city of Charlotte to build a new arena, as he felt like Charlotte Coliseum was too outdated. Shinn also made a bid to relocate the Hornets to Memphis, but eventually that was granted to Vancouver. Around this time, Shinn sparked even more controversy, as a lady in Charlotte claimed that he kidnapped and sexually assaulted her, and the trial became a huge news headline across the city. This tarnished Shinn's reputation even further, and the fans were incredibly angry at him and the city of Charlotte as well. Also, apparently, Shinn's efforts to build a new stadium was rejected by the voters, mainly because even though it's supposed to bring in revenue and create jobs, at the time the city of Charlotte vetoed a bill that would raise minimum wages to $9 per hour. So as a result, the residents of that area fiercely voted against the construction of a new arena, if they weren't guaranteed at least a livable wage from working there. A massive anti-arena campaign was launched. The main message the citizens enforced was, "Why should we support millionaire basketball players and owners if the city does nothing to help the working poor?" In 2002, a city council member stated how obvious and visible the animosity towards Shinn was. The dislike, the hatred for George in this town right now is incredible. That's what this is all about. The people here still love the team, but the dislike for George is a stronger emotion. I don't agree with it, but I see it every day, and it's probably going to cost us all in the long run. The players disliked him too, and this might have had something to do with many of their stars wanting to leave. When Alonzo Mourning talked about this and why he left, he stated, "But it wasn't the team or the players. It's the dislike of the owner. It's sad in a way. All the problems they're having now are just a reflection of people's attitudes toward him." However, despite the voters rejecting Shin's attempts to build a new arena, Charlotte's leaders tried to circumvent the vote and build the stadium anyway, in Uptown Charlotte. This brought even more anger, because now everyone thought Shin paid off the city council to do this for him, and that there was some kind of conspiracy going on or something. Either way, it didn't matter. It was later discovered that Shin issued an ultimatum for the city: build the new arena, or I'll move the Hornets out of here. The city council had no choice. If they lost the team, that would drastically hurt the entire city economically. Now, this is starting to become a huge problem for the NBA as well. While the NBA has always tried to protect its owners, they typically don't want to get involved in the politics of the city they're playing in. If the NBA stepped in and forced Charlotte to stop building the arena, then Shin and other owners would be furious that the NBA is intervening against their business interests. If the NBA stepped in and forced Shin to relocate the team, the city of Charlotte will be angry, and the fans too. They'd be upset they're losing their team. So they came up with a resolution. Shin will be allowed to relocate the team, but Charlotte was promised to get a new team within 2 years, which they did. This was the best solution they could do, and it worked out well for both parties. Also, a new arena did in fact get built, which would eventually become the Spectrum Center. On May 10th, 2002, the NBA officially approved the relocation of the Charlotte Hornets to New Orleans. And so, the Charlotte Hornets became the New Orleans Hornets. Their roster basically remained the same, so they continued to make the playoffs for the next few years. Technically, when this relocation happened, the New Orleans Hornets became a brand new franchise, as their history in Charlotte is no longer with them. It leads to somewhat of an awkward situation, because in the official NBA records, New Orleans is registered as a 2002 expansion team, even though they're supposed to be the continuation of the Charlotte Hornets. Anyway, the NBA followed through with this plan. 2 years later, the Charlotte Bobcats came to fruition. The city of Charlotte got another NBA team, and everyone was happy. Sort of. For George Shin, most people don't know this, but he was one of the poorest NBA owners in the league. I mean, he's not poor, but comparatively speaking, his net worth was much lower than most other owners. It was approximately $100 million. Initially, the move was successful. The team went from averaging 11,000 fans a game to nearly 16,000 fans a game. Unfortunately, over the years, the attendance in New Orleans dropped off too. They traded away some of their franchise players, and even after drafting Chris Paul and David West, even becoming legit title contenders for a few years there, the team was still struggling with attendance. In some years, Shin was eating up the losses. There was also a short period of time when the team had to temporarily relocate to Oklahoma City because of Hurricane Katrina and the devastation it caused. OKC fans were absolutely crazy for the team. This kinda intrigued Shin, as now he wanted to relocate the team to OKC, but he didn't want to go through the headache of everything that happened in Charlotte again. Anyway, in the 2007-8 season, the Hornets won 56 games, but they were still near the bottom in attendance, 26th out of all 30 teams in fact. It was the first time we've heard Shin publicly express regrets. When New Orleans was struggling financially with him at the helm, this really crushed him, and he didn't want to make the same mistake he did in Charlotte. "I've made enough mistakes in my life. I'm not going to make one here. This city needs us here. We're going to make this New Orleans thing work." Sadly, it didn't work out. In 2010, the revenue numbers were not improving, but no other owners wanted to purchase the Hornets, so Shin sold the team to the NBA itself. For a few years, the NBA directly owned the Hornets. Anyway, that sums up the story of how the original Charlotte Hornets got relocated to New Orleans. In his tenure, Shin was one of the most hated people in the entire state, and it was for a good reason too. However, besides the sexual assault reports, I don't think there was much he could do. With the revenue tanking, Shin needed to find some way to keep the team afloat. He never wanted to betray the fans in Charlotte, but even if he did, the NBA still guaranteed that they'd get a new team anyway, which they got 2 years later. I mean, that's better than what happened to Seattle.
The Charlotte Bobcats, a team that only lasted 10 years in the NBA. Those 10 years were filled with disappointment on a year-to-year basis, with very little things to look forward to in the future. From 2004 to 2014, in total, they achieved a record of 293 to 511, a win percentage of 36%. They went through 6 coaches and only made the playoffs a total of 2 times, getting swept in both of those series. How did it come to that? Well, that is the subject of today's video. On June 22nd, 2004, the NBA introduced the 30th team to be in the league, being the Charlotte Bobcats. With that, an expansion draft was done where all the other NBA teams get to protect 8 players while letting the rest be chosen by the expansion team. Now you're going to ask me, who did they pick? The quick and easy answer is a bunch of bums that didn't really last in the league. Even out of the 19 players selected by the Bobcats, only 7 was on that team that season. Anyways, after the expansion draft, they traded for the 2nd pick from the Clippers. I don't know why my favorite team always ends up in these videos, which they used to draft Emeka Okafor, a 6'10" big man from UConn who was coming off a national championship, and considering who was left in the draft, it was definitely the best option. Oh yeah, they also drafted this nigga, but who cares? They got Emeka Okafor. With that settled, they started the 2004 season with rookie Emeka and a bunch of bums and proceeded to be bad with an 18-64 record for the first season of the Charlotte Bobcats dynasty. Well, if you even want to call it a dynasty. But some positives were found during that time. Emeka Okafor won Rookie of the Year while averaging 15 points and 11 rebounds a game, and one of the people they drafted from the expansion draft named Gerald Wallace from the Kings was starting to show what he can do as a scorer and as an elite defender because he averaged 11 points, 5 rebounds, a steal, and a block a game as a small forward. With this, the franchise knew what they had to do. Develop Gerald Wallace further and Emeka and make them a dynamic duo. Other notable players on this team during the time was an old-ass Steve Smith and the three-point god himself, Jason Capono. And nobody else, it was just them 4 really. With the plan of developing Okafor and Wallace being set, the Bobcats still had a top 5 pick in the draft to use. Now originally I was going to rip the Bobcats management for taking big fucking ass, and not the good kind, Raymond Felton with the 5th pick in the draft. But considering how the rest of the draft turned out, there wasn't too many options to choose from that spot. This was more evident when the Bobcats also picked some nigga named Sean May at 13th that didn't even last 5 seasons in the league. It even makes that worse because Danny Granger and Gerald Green was picked a few spots down from that. But anyways, they did improve by 12 wins and they were the 3rd fastest paced team in the league. The only problem that season is that Emeka Okafor only played 26 games, and Gerald Wallace, being Gerald Wallace if you know how he played during his time, only played 52. Though, during that time in 35 minutes a game, he averaged 15 points, 7 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2 blocks a game, which is crazy to think of a player. Oh, and that crazy defensive stat line only gave him 9th in the DPOY race. I don't know how, but guess what? Apparently it's only good for 9th. Other notable players to mention is Raymond Felton scoring 11 points a game in his rookie year, which is good. Though on 39% from the field. Disgusting. Even though the Bobcats are seeming to be improving, their 28-win record is still good for 3rd pick in the draft, which they used to draft a man named Adam Morrison from Gonzaga, who is apparently compared to Larry Legend himself. No, just fucking no. Why? Why was this even a thing? I'm sure everyone knows of him now, but at the time he was regarded as a very good combo forward prospect with his immense scoring potential while not being the most athletic at the same time, just like Larry Bird. But let's look on what they missed out on. Brandon Roy, Rudy Gay, JJ Redick, even Randy Foye or Rondo would have been some great help. But apparently, Adam was the grand prize of that draft according to the Bobcats management. Oh, and they also got Ryan Hollins at 50. But if you know how I feel about Ryan Hollins, then you should know why I'll keep my words short about him. After that failure of a draft, they had what they want and thought what was going to be a core of Emeka Okafor, Gerald Wallace, and Adam Morrison. Those 3 guys together after 2 or 3 years were thought to develop and be a threat in the Eastern Conference. In their first season together, Gerald Wallace ups his scoring numbers to 18 points a game on 50% shooting. Emeka Okafor was able to stay on the court most of the season and averaged 14 points and 11 rebounds with 2 blocks a game, and Adam Morrison, the third pick of that draft, puts up 11 points a game, though on 37% shooting. It just makes a man want to cry. Also, Raymond Felton shoots the ball too fucking much, but that's just Raymond Felton's career. But with that being said, they improved 7 more games on the improvement of Emeka Okafor and Gerald Wallace, while Adam Morrison is still trying to get used to NBA level talent. Will he? We all know he won't. The future is still looking bright in Charlotte though. Even though the future is still looking decent, 33 wins still means a lottery pick. In the 2007 NBA draft, they had the 8th pick and the 22nd pick, which they got in a trade. They had many choices that turned out well in the NBA, like Joakim Noah, Thaddeus Young, Rodney Stuckey, or even Wilson Chandler. But no, they didn't choose any of those players. They chose Brendan Wright, a perennial role player in the NBA, and Elmer fucking J. Fudd himself, Jared Dudley. Yeah, they crashed and burned in this draft. However, the new GM, Rod Higgins, made a nice move in the draft by trading Brendan Wright for a nigga named Jamario Davidson and Jason Richardson. You heard me right, Jason fucking Richardson. With the acquisition of a 26-year-old Jason Richardson, the Bobcats now have a dynamic scorer to help on the perimeter, while Gerald Wallace and Emeka Okafor can focus on defense and scoring when they have to. Even though he was having trouble staying on the court last year and his production took a little bit of a hit, it was still thought that he can bring the scoring needed to help speed up the process of the Bobcats' success. With that being said, the 2007 season was not what they totally expected, since they went from 33 wins to 32, which isn't that bad, but it's still regression. Though the Jason Richardson experiment seemed to be working, since he averaged 22 points a game on decent efficiency while playing all 82 games. Gerald Wallace again brings up his scoring averages while locking up the league. Emeka Okafor was still being a solid big man in the post and playing all of his games. And Raymond Felton is still taking too many shots. Oh, and if you haven't noticed, I didn't say anything about Adam Morrison. Well, mainly because he had a devastating knee injury that took him out for the whole season. So yeah, RIP Adam Morrison's already bad athleticism. Other things to note is that they signed Earl Boykins to 5'5" God later in that season, and Jared Dudley didn't really do much his rookie season. But the Bobcats' 32 wins were obviously not good enough for a playoff spot, so it was right back to the drawing board for the next season. The 2008 NBA draft was littered with big man talent. Only problem is that with Emeka Okafor on the team, the Bobcats didn't need to draft another big man, which explains why they drafted DJ Augustine at 9 and Alexis Ajinka at 20. Both not exactly the best picks, but it was understandable why they did it. Though a few picks down was a great post defender named Serge Ibaka, which they definitely missed out on. But now, apparently they had to draft this nigga. But the big move of that summer was the head coaching change, as Larry Brown took over the head coaching position for the Bobcats, which was shown to be very effective, because in the 2008-2009 season, they won 3 more games than they did last time. However, a lot of changes happened within the team to make it happen. Trade number 1. After a 7-15 start to the season, management wanted to change. So on December 10th, the Bobcats traded Jared Dudley and Jason Richardson and a 2nd-round pick to the Suns for a 31-year-old Raja Bell, a young Boris Diaw, and Sean Singletary. Trade number 2. They traded Ryan Hollins and Matt Carroll for the services of Zhanya Diop. Not anything too important, I just wanted to celebrate the fact that they traded away Ryan Hollins. And trade number 3, they traded Shannon Brown and Adam Morrison, who they officially gave up on, as during that season after a knee surgery, he came back and averaged 4 points on 38% from the field for the services of Vladimir Radjanovic from the Lakers. All those trades turned the season around to give them the best record they had in franchise history. It ain't good, but it is something. There isn't much more to mention stats-wise due to the craziness of all the trades, except the fact that Gerald Wallace took a dip in scoring and the Bobcats ranked last in points per game as a team. After another middle-of-the-road season, the Bobcats were still able to keep a lottery pick at 12, which they used to draft Gerald Henderson, who honestly was the best person they could have got for the draft, all things considered, unless they reached and drafted Drew Holiday. But the big move for them that summer was to trade on July 28th of Emeka Okafor for the young, athletic, and defensive force that is Tyson Chandler, who had injury problems last year. He was thought to bring some more effective defense in the paint, but he only lasted 51 games unfortunately. But let's talk about that season. The Bobcats management continued to make good moves, for example, trading Raja Bell and Vladimir Radjanovic to the Golden State Warriors for Steven Jackson and AC Law, the main prize being Steven Jackson because of his dynamic scoring. Then, to add to the depth, they traded a 2nd-round pick for Theo Ratliff, then traded AC Law, Ronald Murray, and a 2014 first for Tyrus Thomas. Looking back on that, it was definitely an L, but it was good for their time, I guess, and signed an old-ass Larry Hughes near the end of the season. But overall, the Bobcats had the best season up to that point off the scoring of Steven Jackson's 21 points per game and Gerald Wallace's 18 points per game, who even became an all-star because of it. But the most impressive thing about this team was even though, again, they averaged the least amount of points per game, they allowed the least amount of points of opponents' points per game. This suffocating defense all around gave them a 44-38 record, which is good for 7th in the East. Now with this first playoff berth in franchise history, who was their first opponents? Oh, nobody but the Eastern Conference representatives of the finals last year with Defensive Player of the Year Dwight Howard. But this would be the biggest games of the team's existence. They were able to hold Dwight to only 10 points per game. However, they were not able to contain Jameer Nelson, who went off for 24 points a game on almost 50% shooting. And even though they were able to keep the Magic from scoring over 100 points every game, the main struggle for the Bobcats was always efficient scoring. The main scorer, Steven Jackson, did score 18 points per game, however, on 38% shooting, and Gerald Wallace did what he could offensively, but it just wasn't enough. Though, this year did show what the Bobcats could be, a defensive juggernaut. But if they got a few more great offensive pieces, then this team could be something formidable in the East. This year was honestly the start of a major downfall for the Bobcats. First, they traded Tyson Chandler to the Mavericks, who ended up winning the championship that year for some depth that really didn't work out. They signed Kwame Brown, insert random Kwame Brown meme here.
This man was a bona fide scrub. He can't play.
Who wasn't really going to help out with the scoring or defensive effort. In fact, this was one of his last chances in the league, and the only positive thing that ended up happening during that free agency was them signing Sean Livingston as a free agent. But things looked progressively better as the season actually went on. First, after a 9-19 start, Larry Brown was fired and replaced by Paul Silas, who did end up doing a better job later on. They traded the last piece of the original Bobcats team, as Rod Higgins wanted to maximize on Gerald Wallace's trade value, and traded him to the Trailblazers for Dante Cunningham, Sean Marks, Joel Prisbilla, and 2 future first-round picks. But it seemed that Rod Higgins made a decent move with that trade because after that season, Gerald Wallace started to get worse every year. But the end result of all this was a 34-48 record and the start of another rebuild. And here we go again. Just 2 years ago, this team was the best defensive team in the league, and now they're basically stuck at the bottom. But being at the bottom means another high draft pick. The 2011 NBA draft was full of future talent, so there was no way they can get this wrong. And they didn't, because they picked Kemba Walker, who would end up being one of the better players the franchise will ever know. And with that first rounder from Portland, Charlotte ended up picking Tobias Harris, another nice piece for the future. What? They traded Tobias? They traded Tobias, Steven Jackson, and Sean Livingston? Corey Maggette and Bismack Biyombo. What the fuck? They traded a future great scorer in the league, a developing guard, and I guess a decent scorer in Steven Jackson for a year of bad porn and Bismack? Charlotte, y'all did this to yourselves. What the fuck are y'all doing? Anyways, in the 2011 regular season, we all remember it for being the season. The season where the Charlotte Bobcats obtained the worst win percentage record in NBA history with a record of 7-59. A win percentage of 10.6%. Why? Well, mainly because they had no main scorer, as Kemba Walker, Gerald Henderson, and Bad Maggette was all sharing the ball, all at non-efficient rates. Zero depth, and most importantly, there was NBA lockout, so all the players were probably not prepared as they should be. All of those equal up to the worst record in NBA history. The only positive thing that happened was that Corey Maggette ended up getting traded for Ben Gordon in a 2014 first-round pick that ended up becoming Noah Vonleh. And, Ben Gordon didn't really do much there either, so, at least they got rid of Corey. At least they got rid of Corey. Now, after that disaster of a season, it can't possibly get worse. You receive the second pick of the 2012 draft, and now, what will you do with it? I know that Anthony Davis went first, y'all got screwed over, but hey, there are many of choices. What? You picked Michael Kidd-Gilchrist? You picked the man who was only known to be in the league for having a broken jump shot? His shit is worse than mine. In fact, let me tell you on what you could have picked that was better than him. Bradley Beal, Damian Lillard, Terrence Ross, Andre Drummond, Harrison Barnes, or even Dion Gummy Waiters. But no, you picked the fucking project. Mother of God. Okay, at least tell me you improved since last season, which is pretty hard not to do. Okay, 21 games is decent. Plus, y'all have Kemba already showing himself to be a great scorer in the league, as he scored 17 points per game, though he needs to work on that efficiency a little bit. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, on the other hand, is doing pretty decent for his first season, and they signed some veteran help like old man Brandon Hayward and Ramon Sessions. Bismack is even showing a little bit of promise too. So again, the Bobcats have something to look forward to in the development of Kemba Walker. All they need to do is draft well in the next few years, right? Okay, Bobcats, y'all have the 4th pick in the 2013 draft. Even though the draft class isn't looking very good, y'all can still pick up some decent role players who can last long in the league. You know, maybe like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, could be a good 2-guard for Kemba, you know, maybe CJ McCollum, he just needs a few years to develop. Or even the young New Zealander, what's his name, like Steven Adams, he looks good. He looks like he can develop into a nice quality big man. That Giannis kid looks like he can even be an MVP. You never know. So who do you pick, Bobcats?
With the 4th pick in the 2013 NBA draft, the Charlotte Bobcats select Cody Zeller from Indiana University.
Y'all niggas pick Cody Zeller. Well, anyways, after that terrible draft pick, let's see how they do during the offseason. They signed Big Al Jefferson to a 3-year deal and even signed back Joe Henderson for a few years. Looks so y'all are set to see what y'all can do as a team. Y'all even signed a new coach in Steve Clifford, so, you know, maybe the 6th one is a good one for y'all, you know. 6th one in 10 years, not that bad. So maybe the 6 times the charm. It seemed like Steve Clifford did his thing because the Bobcats had a 22-game turnaround in the 2013-2014 season. The main reasons include Al Jefferson's All-NBA third-team season of 22 points and 11 rebounds a game, and Kemba Walker's 17 points a game, though on 39% for the field, but like we said, he's improving. And lastly, the fact that, again, they allowed the 4th least opponent's points per game. All that together means a 7th seed in the playoffs and getting swept by the champion runner-ups, Miami Heat. And at the end of the season, the Bobcats rebranded back to the Hornets, where to this day they struggled to stay relevant, make more and more bad draft picks, and even lost their franchise player once again. But to recap, the Charlotte Bobcats was always set for failure for the most part. All expansion teams only take off because of draft picks. For example, Shaq and the Orlando Magic. And even though the Bobcats picked Gerald Wallace, they still had to either pick the right pick in the draft again and again and again, which they sucked at doing, or somehow bring an Al Jefferson-like free agent to your team every time, which on its own is near to impossible to do since the team plays in a small market. But all in all, the Bobcats, due to many wrong choices in the draft and the lack of talent on the teams, is why the Charlotte Bobcats was a franchise with 10 years of failure. Nowadays, as the Hornets, they only have young players like Devontae Graham, Miles Bridges, PJ Washington, and oh yeah, this nigga. But anyways, that was my look into the Charlotte Bobcats and why things never went well for them.
Charlotte is the worst NBA franchise. Today we are going to break down the history of the NBA's worst organization, a franchise which not only loses games on the court, but also makes poor free agent decisions, drafts foolishly, cannot sell tickets, and is pretty much in every conceivable way a team in dire need of something drastic to happen. The history of basketball in Charlotte, North Carolina technically starts all the way back in 1988, as the original franchise, rocking some unique and memorable unis, consistently rolled out a competitive squad which would make it to the playoffs 7 times before relocating for the 2003 NBA season to New Orleans. This franchise is not the topic of today's video. No. You see, when the original Hornets left, the city of Charlotte was devastated. The NBA was not abandoning the city, however, as they were already in the process of expanding the league. Charlotte was able to land a new team. This was where the modern Charlotte Hornets history begins. To start things off poorly, Charlotte elected to call themselves the Bobcats, a mascot typically reserved for junior high school teams. This unintimidating and unoriginal name was, however, accompanied by a pretty cool looking court design, making use of the team's unique orange and blue color scheme. After their expansion draft, where they would acquire a few young players struggling to make names for themselves in the league, they would actually execute a trade to land the number 2 overall pick in the 2004 NBA draft. A pretty impressive move, resulting in Emeka Okafor. The 2005 season saw the team win only 18 games, which, considering they were an expansion team, was not too surprising. The only bright spot on the year came from their two centers, Emeka Okafor, who would be named Rookie of the Year over number 1 overall pick Dwight Howard, and fellow young big man Primoz Brezek. This season finished with the Cats ranking 28th in ticket sales, but things would begin to improve slowly with time. The 2006 season saw the addition of number 5 overall pick Raymond Felton to pair up to form a young point guard center combo that the franchise hoped would equal a successful future. Though the season was better than the prior year, the Cats still only managed 26 wins, missing out on the playoff. The summer of 06 was the year Michael Jordan took over as head of basketball operations in Charlotte. One of not only North Carolina's, but history's most dominant players was now in charge of the league's newest team. Many saw this as an amazing opportunity for the franchise to kick it up a notch. In the 2006 NBA draft, the Charlotte Bobcats selected the 22-year-old Adam Morrison. Morrison had a splendid rookie campaign along with fellow young stars Okafor Felton and Gerald Wallace, as they were the young faces of the franchise. Each was showing they belonged in the league. Wallace even picked up his numbers to become the franchise's all-time most prolific scorer, putting up 18 points per night. The season was competitive, relatively, but the Bobcats' 33 wins was once again not good enough to make the playoffs. Regardless, the growth of the new franchise was improving. During the summer of 07, the Bobcats rebranded. Jordan fired head coach Bernie Bickerstaff in favor of Sam Vincent, and the franchise also replaced their general manager with Rod Higgins. This was an odd move considering the team was only improving year after year. You will notice Jordan makes many weird decisions in the years to come. The offseason saw the Cats change their on-court to a boring, minimalist hardwood design, as well as dry out their color scheme slightly. On the court, the players were going through changes as well. The franchise's first rising star, Okafor, was stagnating in his 4th season, never taking another step beyond his Rookie of the Year season. Raymond Felton's ability to shoot the ball was in more question than it had ever been, and Morrison actually missed the entirety of the season after a preseason ACL tear. The only bright spots came from emerging star Gerald Wallace, now up to 19 points per game, and newly acquired shooting guard Jason Richardson, who played out of his mind, averaging 21 points per game with a killer 40% three-point shot. These two carried the team through mediocrity as they would finish with 32 wins, a step back from the year prior. Entering the 2009 NBA season, the Bobcats hired Larry Brown to be their new head coach and drafted DJ Augustine with their lottery selection. Early in the season, they made a drastic trade, sending away their leading scorer, Jason Richardson, to the Phoenix Suns in exchange for veterans Raja Bell and Boris Diaw. The season was all over the place. Okafor had regressed even more, Felton was still inconsistent, and Morrison was a shell of his rookie self after returning from injury until being sent away for next to nothing. The team's only constant, Gerald Wallace, carried them through another rough season, finishing with a franchise record 35 wins, 6 games below 500. The following summer saw a plethora of changes in Charlotte. The majority owner decided to step down and sell the team to Michael Jordan entirely, making him the first former player majority owner in league history. They selected Gerald Henderson with their lottery pick, traded Emeka Okafor for Tyson Chandler, and acquired Steven Jackson as well. The 2010 NBA All-Star Game was the first in history to feature a Charlotte Bobcat, as Gerald Wallace would be voted in to represent North Carolina. The season was basically the Jackson and Wallace show, as those two combined for about 40 points a night to carry the Bobcats to their first winning season, 44 wins, and into their first postseason appearance. Here, the number 7 Bobcats would take on the number 2 Orlando Magic. The playoff series was one-sided. The Magic were overwhelmingly the better team and finished it off in 4 games. The 2011 NBA season was supposed to be the next step for the franchise, but their 2 starters, Raymond Felton and Tyson Chandler, would leave during the offseason, leaving some glaring holes in the already weak team. After a poor start, Jordan replaced Larry Brown with Paul Silas as the head coach. The team struggled throughout the year, and the face of the franchise, Gerald Wallace, would be traded mid-season for a plethora of young, unremarkable players. Steven Jackson led the team with 18 points per night to a 34-win record, missing out on the playoffs once again. The summer of 2011 was a big turning point for the franchise. Many front office positions were swapped out, The roster also received an overhaul as the team's best player, Steven Jackson, as well as the inconsistent point guard Sean Livingston, were traded to the Milwaukee Bucks for veteran Corey Maggette and the number 7 overall pick of that summer's draft. The 2011 NBA draft featured 2 lottery pick opportunities for the Bobcats. How did they use them? With the 7th pick, the team selected an undersized and unproven young center from Africa, Bismack Biyombo. Biyombo was only 18 years old at the time and had barely any noteworthy experience on the court. His most notable accomplishment was blocking 10 shots in a Nike camp. It was the 9th overall pick where they struck gold, however, selecting Kemba Walker. Walker was a 20-year-old NCAA champion, a little more worthy of the selection if you ask me. This season would take the cake as the worst basketball season in the history of the NBA. The Charlotte Bobcats would finish with only 7 total wins in the lockout-shortened 66-game season, a winning percentage of 10%. The team was an embarrassment. Number 7 overall pick Biyombo put up only 5 points per night as a starter, and Walker put up 12 points, mostly coming off the bench. There was no consistency throughout the season except for losses. They finished the year losing 23 straight games. At the end of the season, Jordan made it clear changes would be coming. During the summer of 2012, the Bobcats once again rebranded in an attempt to throw out the past and start anew. Interest in the franchise was at an all-time low, so Jordan made some changes to remind people of North Carolina about their Tar Heels and their old Hornets by changing the team's color scheme to focus almost entirely on blue. Even as a child, I saw this move as just a desperate way to pretend to be the old Charlotte Hornets. As a result of finishing so poorly the year prior, the Bobcats were awarded the number 2 selection in the 2012 NBA draft, their highest pick since their inaugural year. 2012 was a stacked draft class. After Anthony Davis was selected first overall, players such as Bradley Beal, Damian Lillard, Andre Drummond, and even Draymond Green remained on the board. Yet, Jordan selected Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Playing at the University of Kentucky, the 6'7" Kidd-Gilchrist put up only 11 points per game without the ability to shoot threes. I am not a professional scout making the big bucks, but how the heck do you justify picking this guy 2nd overall? Thankfully for Jordan, Kemba Walker took a major step forward this season to lead the team with 17 points, 5 assists a night. Gerald Henderson and newly acquired fellow shooting guards Ramon Sessions and Ben Gordon also helped keep the team afloat. Biyombo and Kidd-Gilchrist each struggled mightily, but in the end they ended up tripling the previous year's win total to 21 victories, still finishing far out of playoff contention. At the end of the season, Jordan once again replaced the head coach spot, this time with Steve Clifford. Thanks to yet another woeful season, the Bobcats were awarded the 4th pick in the 2013 NBA draft. A historically weak draft, but still made the decision to pass up on Giannis Antetokounmpo, Steven Adams, and CJ McCollum in favor of Cody Zeller. The team made one other noteworthy acquisition in the offseason by signing free agent big man Al Jefferson to a 3-year contract. Jefferson immediately took over as the franchise's brightest star. He played an old-school back-to-the-basket game which was becoming more and more dated, but gosh dang it was effective. Jefferson put up 21 points, 10 rebounds per game, becoming the franchise's all-time best center, along with Kemba Walker once again putting up 17 points a night and a career-high 6 assists a game. Biyombo had fallen to only 2 points per game, Kidd-Gilchrist down to 6, and Cody Zeller was only racking up 5 points a night. The team's floor spacing was horrendous as seemingly nobody could shoot threes, and their playstyle was slow, but they did manage to sneak out with 43 wins, their 2nd winning season in 10 years of existence, and would make the playoffs as a result. The number 7 seed Bobcats would take on the number 2 LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh led Miami Heat in the first round, which you can guess did not end well. The Miami Heat 1-4. Michael Jordan needed to do something to spark interest in his failing franchise. Even as a playoff team with a young star in the making and the legendary Michael Jordan as owner, the Charlotte Bobcats ranked 25th in ticket sales, 10 straight years at the bottom of the league. The old Charlotte Hornets, who had moved to New Orleans years ago, recently officially changed their name to the New Orleans Pelicans. This gave MJ an idea. He changed the name of his team to the Charlotte Hornets, officially confusing record books and future generations for years to come. Technically, the Hornets have adopted all the old Hornets records, but that's stupid. You can't do that. I don't count that, okay? The Hornets history starts with the Bobcats, so let's just get that clear. The new look Hornets had a new logo, new court design, and a new nickname, Buzz City. Interest in Charlotte basketball was at the highest it had been in over a decade. Of course, they were still the same team, just a different paint job. With the 9th overall pick in the 2014 NBA draft, instead of selecting Zach LaVine, Clint Capella, or even TJ Warren, the team opted for Noah Vonleh, a 6'9" power forward who had just put up 11 points per game while barely ever attempting a three in college. See a trend here? MJ doesn't seem to recognize how important three-point shooting is, as 4 of his last 5 lottery picks didn't shoot them. Despite all the initial buzz for the Hornets, they were still what they were, a 33-win team that would once again miss out on the playoffs. Kemba Walker may have been leading the team in scoring and passing, but he was struggling mightily with his jump shot, only hitting 38% from the field and 30% from deep. That just will not cut it. Al Jefferson, a 30-year-old landlocked traditional center, unsurprisingly, was not able to perform well being surrounded by non-shooters. The recent big money free agent Lance Stevenson also struggled his way through an 8-point per game season, shooting 37% from the field and the all-time worst three-point percentage of 17% from deep. Kid Gilchrist was thrown into the starting 5 to score 10 points a night and not do much else. Cody Zeller was only able to put up 7 a game and couldn't shoot. Biyombo played because why not? 4 points per game have to come from somewhere. And Noah Vonleh, big shocker, was actually the least effective player on the team, putting up 3 points per game. This was not a team that would win many games. It is disappointing. You would think that 11 years of basketball experience and being led by Michael Jordan would be enough to put something together, right? At the absolute very least, the Hornets had their best ticket sales of all time, ranking 19th in the league. Yes, 19th. During the summer of 2015, Charlotte needed to do something different. This came in the form of using their 9th overall pick on somebody who can actually shoot threes, Frank Kaminsky. An experienced NCAA champion is what brought them success last time. Maybe it can happen again. They also acquired Nicholas Batum, Jeremy Lamb, and Jeremy Lin, 3 guys in their prime looking to win now. Of course, they decided to give Kid Gilchrist a 4-year, $52 million extension after missing almost the entirety of last season, but whatever. This season, at 25 years old, Kemba Walker improved drastically. He finished the year putting up a career-high 20 points a night along with 5 assists while shooting a very impressive 42 and 37%. Batum turned out to be an exceptional complementary piece, averaging 14 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists per game. The rest of the squad ranged from just okay to poor. Al Jefferson was looking more like a 40-year-old man on the court, Jeremy Lin was okay but nothing special, and none of their three-point shooters were all that remarkable. In the end, the team was competitive, and the 2016 Hornets actually finished with a franchise record 48 wins. Good enough for a franchise record high 6th place in the Eastern Conference. For the first time, the city of Charlotte had a postseason to get excited about. The number 6 Hornets versus the number 3 Miami Heat. A rematch of sorts, but this Heat team was completely different. Led by Goran Dragic and the aging Dwayne Wade, the series would be pushed to 7 games. Efficiency was thrown out the door under the playoff pressure, and is what ultimately cost the Hornets from making it to the second round. Walker led the team with 22 points per night, but his efficiencies fell back down to 36 and 32%. Nobody else on the Hornets played well. The summer of 2016 has gone down in history as being one of the worst. As a result of a new television agreement, money was at an all-time high. Teams spent money like there was no tomorrow, and many would regret it soon. The Hornets were one of the prime examples of this. Charlotte gave Batum a 5-year, $120 million contract, a 27-year-old putting up 14 points a game. They also gave Marvin Williams a 4-year, $55 million deal, a 29-year-old putting up 11 a game. They also would bring in a couple aging veterans, Roy Hibbert, Marco Bellinelli, and Ramon Sessions, just for good measure. The team was capped out and ready to roll. The season had its ups and downs, mostly downs. The team was inconsistent and once again lacked any shooters. The team was pretty unremarkable except for one guy, Kemba Walker. He made the final step to become an all-star. At 26 years old, Walker was the franchise's second all-star following 2009's Gerald Wallace. He managed to put up a career-high 23 points, 5 assists a game, while shooting a career-high 44 and 39%. He was what kept the team alive throughout most of the year. But in the end, the team would only win 36 games, missing out on the playoffs again. The summer of 2017 actually looked pretty good. The front office was able to turn a couple of bad contracts into Dwight Howard, the man selected way back in 2004 just before Emeka Okafor, was finally in Charlotte. Howard was now a 32-year-old, still athletic, big man who was coming off of a relatively disappointing season. Although please keep in mind that a disappointing season for Dwight Howard is 13 points, 12 rebounds per game, shooting 63% from the field. He was a terrific addition. The draft that summer was overhyped to say the least. Not many great players have come out of it, and with the Hornets selecting number 11, you cannot expect much. But of course, Donovan Mitchell, John Collins, and Kyle Kuzma were still on the board, but Michael Jordan and company selected Malik Monk, a one-and-done who actually looked pretty good in college. And to round it all off, they had their franchise's lone all-star returning in his prime. A postseason run was once again the goal. This season was once again a disappointment. The Hornets were not consistent enough to take down any actually good squads. Frank Kaminsky hit a wall in development. Cody Zeller hit that wall a year ago, and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist hit that wall 3 years ago. Malik Monk was raw and produced very little, but considering he was only 19 years old, what else do you expect? And Batum and Williams just kept cashing checks instead of working on their game. Kemba followed up a terrific season with another great one, putting up 22 points, 5 assists a game while shooting 43 and 38% from the field, making his second All-Star game. And Dwight Howard played out of his mind on more than one occasion, averaging a very impressive 16 and 12. But in the end, it didn't even matter. The Hornets once again missed the playoffs, finishing with 36 wins, identical to the year prior. At the end of the year, head coach Steve Clifford was fired after 5 seasons with 2 playoff appearances, the best in franchise history. The summer of 2018 saw Charlotte revert back to their old habits of making poor decisions. MJ helped orchestrate a trade to bring back the draft bust from years ago, Bismack Biyombo, except now he was making a staggering $17 million a year for each of the next 2 seasons. To go along with Biyombo, let me refresh to you who the Hornets are actually paying. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, 2 years, $13 million per year. Cody Zeller signed an extension of about $14 million per year for 3 more years. Marvin Williams about $15 million per year for 2 more years. And of course, Nicholas Batum, $25 million per year for 3 more years. None of these guys put up more than 13 points a game last season. Notice something missing? Somehow the Hornets have avoided paying out their superstar, their franchise's all-time leading scorer and 2-time All-Star, Kemba Walker. This is a very questionable decision to say the least. Regardless, the team was ready to make another run at the playoffs. 2019 was going to be their season. James Borrego was going to be the head coach to finally make it all work. Nope. Even with an oddball signing of Tony Parker to back up Walker, the Hornets were at best a limbo team just on the outside of ever really being in the playoff hunt. The season came and went, and with the only noteworthy player being once again Walker, who did everything in his power to make Charlotte competitive, the team once again missed the playoffs. He finished the season with a career-high average of 25 points, 5 assists per game. He carried this team to 39 wins, playing in all 82 games. To put a cherry on top of another questionable season, Michael Jordan and the Hornets did something so foolish, I cannot imagine how these guys are getting paid to do what they do. Instead of trying to re-sign Kemba Walker, their franchise's best player, they instead signed Terry Rozier, a now 25-year-old coming off of a season where he managed to put up only 9 points, 2 assists per game, while shooting 38% from the field. Not only did they make this ugly decision, They also agreed to pay Rozier $58 million over 3 seasons. That is the same amount Kemba Walker made over 8 seasons. The Charlotte Bobcats / New Look Hornets have been a franchise for 15 years. In this time, they have put together only 3 seasons above 500 and have won a grand total of 3 playoff games. The team had one glimmer of hope in their undersized second option from the 2011 NBA draft, but they threw him away for someone younger and not nearly as talented. It is funny. In the real world, if someone does a poor job in their line of work, then they are at risk of being fired. If they have another bad year, they should be fired. If they have another bad year, and another bad year, and another bad year, and so on, they should be fired. Yet, in basketball ownership, that is not the case. Money makes decisions. Even if money is horrible at making decisions, they get to make the decisions. I am not saying this is all Michael Jordan's fault, but what I am saying is he is to blame for a lot of it. This team has been horrendous over 15 years. The Hornets are a garbage franchise that make the Phoenix Suns and New York Knicks look like they know what they are doing. Hopefully this can change, but we'll see. So there you guys have it. My take on the NBA's worst franchise.
Now, Michael Jordan is the GOAT when it comes to being like a basketball player, and he's an amazing businessman. He's one of the few NBA players who has ever been able to make more money off the court than he did on it, and was able to become one of the first billionaires from the game of basketball and one of the few billion-dollar athletes ever. So when he took ownership of the Hornets in 2010, many Hornets fans, or as they were called back then, the Bobcats, were excited because their team wasn't looking too good, only winning 34 games that year and missing the playoffs. And honestly, the years to come wouldn't look too hot for the Hornets either, with them making the playoffs only twice in 10 years, and both of those times losing to the Heat in the first round. But this year, I believe the Hornets are finally on the right track and might see some success coming their way in the near future. And honestly, saying that is kind of weird because I think that we've all had like the base idea that the Hornets are just trash and always will be. But I think Michael Jordan, after 10 years of not winning anything while being the owner of the Hornets, I think he finally has built a team that could win in the near future, or at least get in a base for that team. Now, I think a lot of this team's future success is put on the shoulders of LaMelo Ball, which could be a really good thing moving forward or a really bad one, and also one that could set this team back again to being trash. But as I said in one of my LaMelo Ball videos, I personally think that the Hornets would be a great destination for him, and this is also just a great pick for the Hornets in general as well, even if he does turn out to be a bust. Not saying that he will be a bust, but if he does turn out to be a bust, the Hornets still kind of win a little bit. Let me explain how LaMelo benefits from this, starting with the fact that the Hornets are just expected to be bad. So I don't think we should expect these unreasonable expectations from LaMelo right off the bat. And can we just change our expectations on LaMelo? Because people are acting as if he's going to average like 20 and 10 his rookie year. When let's be real here, he isn't. To be honest, I see him averaging somewhere around like 15 points and like 7 assists, which would honestly be considered a good rookie year for him. I think it would take him a while to get used to the NBA and the play style in it, and he's also going to need to change his shot tendency, which to his credit, he's gotten a whole lot better from his time in high school, which I can respect a whole lot, because when he was first blowing up in Chino Hills, where he would just shoot wherever and whenever he wanted, which at first I didn't think he would break out of, but as he has gotten older, he really has gotten better at what shots to take and what shots not to take. But he still has moments where like he takes like bad shots and just chucks up threes and kind of gets in like a heat check moment, which he won't get away with in the NBA, but I feel like as time goes on, that will change. So time is going to be needed for LaMelo to really start doing his thing. In my opinion, I think it will take him about like a year or two to get there, but the best case scenario is that like he's like Trae Young, where he starts off kind of rough in his rookie year, then kind of gets used to the NBA and then skyrockets from there. But I'm betting on it will take him like a year or two to come into his own, which isn't that bad for like a 19-year-old. Then as I said, the Hornets aren't expected to win, so that means that he has a lot of time to get used to things and find out what works for him and what doesn't, instead of feeling rushed to like win now. But let's say he does win a lot in his rookie year, well that just boosts his confidence, and that's only going to be a positive for him. Then the rest of the team isn't that bad, but it's not that good, like don't get me wrong. There's a few good pieces that this team has that they can build around with Melo, starting with Devontae Graham, who broke out last season and showed that he can be a reliable scorer. And I think someone young like him can really help LaMelo in his progression. Now Graham is not quite an all-star yet, but he's pretty close to one I believe. And he's also a good three-point shooter. Dude took 9 threes a game and shot 38%. That honestly isn't that bad for the type of threes that he actually took. And recently they signed Gordon Hayward, who is decent, but I don't know what's up with Jordan and giving like players a fuck ton of money even if they don't deserve it. Like Gordon Hayward is good and is decent, and like he's a plus for your team, but he's not a $120 million player. And also Rozier isn't a $58 million player either. But I think it's either going to be LaMelo or Rozier starting at point guard this year, which if LaMelo's on the bench, this just means that he can learn from both Graham and Rozier, but I can also see him starting as well. Or if Rozier is not okay with being a backup to LaMelo, then I believe you just need to trade him at that point. Like, LaMelo is the guy you are putting your trust and franchise in, and you need to do everything in your power to make him happy. And if that will make him succeed, then I guess you gotta do it. Now, this move is also good for the Hornets with the fact the Hornets had the second worst attendance this past season, and most of that is because one, they suck, but also there was no reason for anyone to go to the games. There was nobody anyone wanted to watch in particular. And now with LaMelo, you have someone that fans want to come and watch. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be filling up the arena, but because of him, it will most definitely boost your attendance when stadiums open back up. Then players like Malik Monk, who I don't think is going to be anything special, but someone who can be at least a 3-and-D guy, or at least at bare minimum, someone who can stand in the corner and make threes when LaMelo makes plays for him. And then Miles Bridges, who I think has more upside than Monk. He could also grow this upcoming season, seeing he did boost his scoring by a few points this year, so maybe with less pressure on him, we could see a rise in stats from him. Then there could be some moves that could be made this offseason, and one of those players that I see like circling around a lot, especially now, is Westbrook, who personally I don't think the Hornets should try to get, because I know I'm gonna sound like a Russ hater, but Russ could really fuck your whole team's like timeline up, because the Hornets are a very young team with a good amount of depth, and with Russ, to first get him, you lose a lot of that depth, and then you just get another ball dominant point guard who's only looking to put up stats. What they do need is veterans who are there to help out the young guys and not just there to help themselves out, kind of like what Vince Carter was on the Hawks, where he was more there to help the younger guys develop instead of putting up stats. That's what the Hornets need. They also need a center, like a pure center, someone who can just set screens for LaMelo and Graham. I'm thinking someone like Clint Capella or Hassan Whiteside, someone who gives you defense and is a presence in the paint. Now, I'm not saying that this team is going to be a playoff team next season. I see them being a competitive 8th to like 10th seed. Like, they might make the playoffs as the 8th seed if a few things go their way, but I really see them being a competitive 9th seed, fighting for an 8th seed to get into the playoffs. And honestly, for most teams, that would suck, but for a team as young as the Hornets, I think that would be really good for them. I think for Hornets fans, you will need to wait a little longer before your team becomes an actual threat, but I'm saying in the next 5 years, I can see this team doing really well if they keep doing what they're doing now and the players they drafted progress upwards.
The future for the NBA seems bright, especially now in the Eastern Conference. It's finally good to say that the Eastern Conference is finally back with amazing talent, with the top teams already out in the Eastern Conference, as well as the lower tier teams that are still developing. Those teams have very bright futures as well. And one of those teams, especially in my opinion, and this team has definitely got a lot of buzz lately, and that team is the Charlotte Hornets. In this video today, I'm briefly going to be discussing the truth about the Hornets. Now, in the past, we all know that the Hornets, they have been in rebuilding situations plenty of times. This team, over the years, even when they were the Bobcats, they really weren't ever a really good team. Of course, we all knew a while ago they had one of the worst records in NBA history with a 7-59 in the NBA lockout year. This team overall, you know, they've had many ups and downs, and they even lost a great player in Kemba Walker because they failed to truly rebuild around that man and really help him compete against other teams out in the Eastern Conference. And because of that, the Hornets, they failed miserably, making it to the playoffs with Kemba on the roster only twice. Once when it was with the Bobcats with Al Jefferson, and the second time when the Hornets, they were a much better team with Nick Batum, Jeremy Lin, and many other great players. But that was the last time back in 2016 that the Hornets made it to the playoffs. And with Kemba Walker now on the Boston Celtics making it to the playoffs consistently, the Hornets are now in a totally new direction. We all know they traded Terry Rozier for Kemba Walker, and Terry Rozier has been a pretty good player now for the Hornets. Despite the struggles early on, especially this season with Devontae Graham, he's starting to find his groove for the Hornets, and last season he definitely proved that he can definitely be a franchise piece for this team. Alongside PJ Washington and Miles Bridges, both guys who are power forwards, they have a really dynamic game with athleticism, defensive upside, and many more attributes, including now drafting LaMelo Ball, who is definitely, in my opinion, probably going to be the best player on this team in the next 2-3 years. And you add that with some of the veterans they have on this team, with their best player right now being Gordon Hayward, the Hornets seem to be going into a better direction, and they're even the 8th seed right now in the Eastern Conference. even though that may eventually change because we all know the Miami Heat, they won't be this bad for long. The Hornets are still a very good team that's in development. And not only that, that's really good about the Hornets, it's also really good that the average age of this team is 24.1 years old. And that is the second youngest team in the entire NBA, only behind the Minnesota Timberwolves with an average age of 23.6. So what's really beneficial for this team is that there are many players, even Terry Rozier, as I mentioned earlier, and many other guys, Miles Bridges, PJ Washington, of course LaMelo Ball, Malik Monk especially too. They have many guys on this team that can still develop into great basketball players. One guy the Hornets, in my opinion, should definitely play a lot more is Malik Monk, because Malik Monk is a bucket. This guy is a natural scorer, and when he's on the court, he's definitely going to get buckets. Sadly, the Hornets don't even give him much playing time to begin with. And we all know about the time about LaMelo Ball and Devontae Graham, and LaMelo possibly taking over the starting spot for Devontae Graham. And eventually in the future, that may happen. Because I think the guy who's going to be the best player on this team is undoubtedly LaMelo Ball. And we've already seen the things he's been able to do on a basketball court. This guy, he's definitely going to be in contention this year, especially for Rookie of the Year. But if LaMelo continues to develop the way he does, I wouldn't be surprised if the Hornets might trade away Devontae Graham, especially if he does want to still continue to be a starter, or he comes off the bench and he provides the great playmaking ability and shooting that he does for this Hornets team. Because last year, he definitely showed what he can possibly become one day. And now in his third year as being head coach, James Borrego has definitely been a big part of the Hornets rebuild. And one thing that the Hornets, they didn't do in the past compared to now is, especially now since the team is getting a lot more younger, the Hornets never really gave their young guys much playing time, especially when Steve Clifford was the head coach of the team. But now more rookies like LaMelo Ball is seeing a much better playing time on the basketball court. He's averaging 25.3 minutes per game, and I wouldn't be surprised, especially with the development he's shown this season, that his minutes continue to go up this year for the Hornets. But overall, I believe that this Hornets team, especially with development of their key young guys in Devontae Graham, PJ Washington, Miles Bridges, LaMelo Ball, Malik Monk, if they continue to have him still on the team. You still have Terry Rozier, who's a really solid piece, and he's in his prime right now, and a veteran guy in Gordon Hayward. Right now, the Hornets are definitely in contention to possibly be an 8th seed this season. But going into the future, I believe that the Hornets, they're definitely going to acquire another draft pick. And, hopefully if that pick hits, this team can definitely be something amazing to watch in the future. And if, they can actually get guys to come and play in Charlotte, because, it's not a big market city. Not many NBA players want to go play there in the first place. So it was really good that the team was able to acquire Gordon Hayward, and he was looking like an all-star this year, and he definitely will make the all-star team this year. The future is looking very optimistic for the Charlotte Hornets if they continue to make the right decisions. This is a young team with a lot of promise and a lot of upside to grow and to possibly become one of the best teams one day out in the Eastern Conference.
So Charlotte became a franchise in 1988, and there had been basketball teams in Charlotte before, but they weren't ever in the NBA. So when the team was brought in 1988, they didn't have anything really. They only had the Charlotte Coliseum. They didn't have a team name. They didn't have pretty much anything. The creator of the uniforms and the logo, his name was Alexander Julian. He's a Chapel Hill native. He also designed the UNC basketball jerseys, which were a huge hit. And he was the inventor of the Argyle in the UNC jerseys. The Argyle in that looked like a lot of people were like, oh, that's just a play on the Four Corners play in the NBA, or it's like a play on Irish heritage in North Carolina. But Julian just thought it was timeless, and Michael Jordan, of all people, actually loved it, which was kind of the catalyst of it being as big as it is today, really. So he was hired by the Hornets to design these without a name for the team yet. The only thing they really had was the Charlotte Coliseum, which had a hint of teal green. He was told to use that type of teal green, but he was pretty much known for this combination, and the combination was the purple and teal that a lot of people are used to today. the reason he loved it was because it looked flattering on anyone, no matter the skin tone, which is what he pretty much said. He saw that the teal green wasn't exactly the color that he wanted to use, so he like contacted the people who like told him to make the jerseys. It was like, hey, listen, I'm making these jerseys for you, why don't I just use the color that I'm used to and hopefully make a really good design out of it? And they said, yeah, that's fine. The interesting thing about the Charlotte Hornets jerseys is, one, it was the first jersey in NBA history to feature pinstripes, which was a huge hit. Tons of teams started like picking up on that. The Bulls included, also the Magic. Another thing is, it was one of the first teams, I don't know if it was the catalyst, but it was one of the first teams to have Charlotte on the front of each jersey, which the home and the away. And that was because the jerseys were pretty much designed while the name was still being picked. They ended up going with the Hornets through a fan vote. He actually created the original logo. The logo that he created was put onto the neck of the shorts, and on the jersey he featured a V-neck, a lot like UNC's jerseys at the time, the same ones that he designed, and he put pinstripes on the jersey, like I said before. The thing with his original design was they actually had baggy shorts, not like extremely baggy, but they were still more baggy than current NBA jerseys. And Kelly Tripucka, the actual first Charlotte Hornets like draft pick, I think he was the first draft pick, I could be wrong, but him and some of his teammates actually took the shorts to a tailor to get them shorter, a lot like the rest of the league. When Julian actually saw that, he actually kind of was like mortified, because he was like, that's not my design, like I wanted him to be long, but obviously they ended up keeping the short shorts. The funny thing about Julian actually though is he didn't really want to be paid, but he wanted a share of the replica jerseys sold. He ended up not getting that, and he was actually kind of upset because he thought he could get like 6 figures out of the deal. But for the pay for like designing the jerseys and stuff like that, he wanted 5 pounds of Carolina barbecue a month to be FedExed to him in Connecticut. I don't know exactly like how long that deal like lasted, but that's extremely interesting to me. He didn't want to be paid, he just wanted like 5 pounds of Carolina barbecue, which is delicious barbecue. Now, the pinstripes, a lot of people are like really confused because like the pinstripe colors don't really make sense. You have green, blue, purple, white, and teal. The green actually at the time was for the UNC Charlotte 49ers, and the blue was for UNC. The purple, teal, and white were just for the Hornets. A lot of people don't really know why there's green included. It's not even on their palette at all, but it was pretty much for, you know, just the Charlotte 49ers, just to like talk about like the entire like Charlotte area. There was actually a purple version of this jersey added in 1994, and it stayed for the rest of the seasons with this jersey. It's not one of the most like popular Charlotte Hornets jerseys. If you look at them up, that you're only going to get the teal and white ones pretty much. Other teams added a lot of third jerseys in 1994 and next season. Most likely they were added due to like the popularity of jerseys in like the start of the 90s, like going into the end. I tried looking up like the sales and stuff like that, and the sales figures, and like the license history actually. And in 1994 there wasn't actually any changes, which is weird because in 1998 Champion became the sole provider of replica jerseys, and I thought it would have been because of the Champion jerseys being like extremely popular at the time, but it was actually just I feel like the NBA told a bunch of teams to add like third jerseys in during the season. In 1997-1998, the Charlotte Hornets jerseys actually were changed up a little bit. Not much, but they were changed. Hugo was moved from the front of the shorts down to the bottom leg. They got side panels down from the armpit to the bottom of the leg, and there was actually added double pinstripes. I couldn't really find like why they did this. I looked it up. The only thing I found was a comment on uniwatch.com, I believe, and it said the double pinstripes represent the second decade in Hornets basketball history, which makes sense because like they came in 1988 and 1988, and this was like 1997, 1998. Apparently Alexander Julian consulted on this design as well, but his designs were like way too complicated to fabricate. So this was created. I guess he wanted like a more modern approach. He wanted a different type of jersey for this, and they ended up just going with this, with the regular Charlotte jerseys, double pinstripes with panels down the side. They ended up staying with just these two threads for the rest of their time in Charlotte from 1997 to 2002. They didn't add in a secondary purple jersey. They didn't have any, like, back then there wasn't really any like throwback nights or anything like that. So they just rolled with those two jerseys for 5 or 6 years until Charlotte actually left for New Orleans. Pretty interesting because normally teams had a lot of like third jerseys, like a lot of teams added in a third jersey in 1994, 1995, and Charlotte kind of just used that purple one for a couple seasons and then just ended with just two threads. So in 2002, the Baron Davis age, you know, that crazy time in Charlotte history, we actually got moved to New Orleans, and that was a crazy time, but Charlotte really wanted a basketball team put back into Charlotte. In 2004, the Charlotte Bobcats actually became a team. In 2003, it was obviously talked about and stuff like that. But the Charlotte Bobcats history is like kind of interesting to me. The name and uniform was designed by just a team called Game Plan Creative. And they came up with the Charlotte Flight and the Charlotte Dragons. Two of those teams, I think it was voted on by the public. Both of those would actually have been awesome team names. Charlotte Flight, that would have been the coolest thing I've ever heard. But the Bobcats' original owner, Robert Johnson, obviously had the biggest stake in the name and stuff like that, and he named them the Bobcats. His name's Robert Johnson. He named them the Bobcats. One of the worst people in Charlotte basketball history. So the color of the jersey was obviously orange, dark blue, black, white. The black kind of was just an accent, but this was a weird color because no other NBA teams had like this reddish orange, or just orange for anything. I think the only team in NBA history with an orange jersey was, I think, Cleveland in the mid like 80s or something like that, and the Spirits of St. Louis. I personally don't know any other teams that wore like orange as a prominent color. David Stern at the time thought that orange was going to be a big color in the NBA whenever Charlotte like created their jerseys at the time. The reason why orange was like such a prominent color in this was because, one, Charlotte Bobcats wanted to like be like the Charlotte Hornets were brought upon. Like it was a complete global brand. Like you could go to China, kids would be wearing Charlotte Hornets purple and teal. They wanted orange and dark blue to be like that purple and teal. Obviously, like, things change, and now we think back at it and, like, that was the ugliest color, but at the time, they thought it was going to, like, expand. Also, another reason was because Robert Johnson, again, he went to the University of Illinois and did post-grad work at Princeton. Both of those schools' primary colors are orange. And obviously, again, he had a huge stake in the team, and whatever he says goes, really. One cool thing about these jerseys, though, is the side panels. If you haven't noticed, it's like diamond shapes, kind of. You got the dark blue at the top, you got black, and then you got either white or orange, depends on home or away. The reason they have those side panels gave a lot of airflow to the player because of like the gray stripes between. It would keep the jersey connected, and it would just give a lot of airflow, and it was a cool design. One thing that is so prominent about these jerseys, that if you saw the Bobcats play up until like 2009 or so, you probably were like, wow, why are those jerseys so shiny? And that was because of the Reebok Play Dry technology. There's a lot of jerseys that had this certain technology at the time. It was like the Golden State Warriors. Those two teams are the ones that I like kind of see the most. I know for the fact like Cleveland Cavaliers had it as well, but it really, in my opinion, it hindered the look of the jerseys on the court. They wanted orange and dark blue to be like a prominent color. If it had the current like Rev 30 type of detailing on it, I feel like that could have happened. But because of that, they were just so shiny. You're watching it from the TV, or you're at the game. You're like, man, like I can't even see, you know. In 2006, a dark blue jersey was introduced that was the same exact like palette as the white and orange. The reason they added this was because like UNC is like a light blue, the Carolina blue obviously, Duke is the dark blue or just royal blue, and they wanted another color in there that was like blue, and it would touch with the region, like everyone wanted to recognize it and become affiliated with that like dark blue. and that was their main goal. They also wanted to like make orange like a secondary color in around like 2008 or so, and ended up changing that in like 2010. But if you look at the jerseys, orange was brightened like in 2008 from the reddish orange to just regular orange. And in 2008 and 2009, a racing stripe alternate was added to the rotation to cater to the NASCAR fans in Charlotte. If you've ever seen those jerseys with the black and white like checkerboard, those were added because they wanted to cater to Charlotte fans. Also, Charlotte was selected to have a Green Week jersey to promote a green earth and to recycle. These jerseys also had the Reebok like dry fit technology, and if you look at them, they're still shiny, but they're not as shiny just because of the color, which goes back to my main point. I think the orange could have worked if the jersey wasn't so shiny, because the green shiny, it looks good. Like the Charlotte looks good, the side panels look good. But yeah, in 2009, they decided to change the jerseys up again. They modernized the jersey a little bit, and this is when orange was eliminated as a primary color. The jerseys changed, they added pinstripes to the current design and modernized the font. This, in my opinion, I feel like this was probably brought about because Reebok's lost its licensing to the Bobcats in 2007, and it was given to Adidas. And one of the main focuses on the jerseys were the actual shiny fabric. So Adidas had shiny fabric a little bit in 2009, but it wasn't as shiny, and I feel like a lot of people in the Charlotte Bobcats like circle were like, okay, we need to probably change up these jerseys, maybe give us pinstripes back to bring back the Charlotte Hornets history, because at the time the New Orleans Hornets, now the Pelicans, actually eliminated the pinstripes. So they probably brought them back just because of that. Like I said before, orange was eliminated from primary color and only became an accent color. They kept the NASCAR jerseys with a new design in 2010, but were actually eliminated after that. And in 2012, there was a Carolina Cougars jersey worn, and it was only used on Hardwood Classics nights, so they would play against another team that had like a throwback like ABA jersey. So yeah, and also I found this picture online of DJ Augustine with a black Charlotte Hornets alternate, and I looked around for a long time figuring out if this was real, like maybe they wore these in the preseason, like one game or something like that. But I found the original picture, and these actually were just modified from a fan, but I think they look pretty decent, to be honest. I really like the gray on the shorts, and those shoes match with that jersey pretty much perfectly. So I just thought that was interesting, and I kind of wanted to show you guys, but those jerseys aren't real. In 2012, the jerseys changed again, thanks to Michael Jordan becoming a majority owner in 2010. When Jordan became majority owner, he pretty much said he wanted to have orange become an actual accent color, like barely have it on the jerseys at all, light blue and gray becoming secondary colors, and the dark blue becoming the most prominent color on the jerseys. This pretty much got rid of Bob Johnson's like entire legacy on the team. The Bobcats home jersey actually just said Cats. It didn't even say Bobcats. This was the first time in Bobcats history that they thought they were set for a while and didn't want any changes, and were finally tied to the roots of the city, if you think about it. This was when the team actually picked up Al Jefferson, and the team was going back from the losing culture that the Charlotte Bobcats had, and were actually starting to win. In 2014, the Hornets name was available to be taken again. New Orleans changed their name to the Pelicans. There was no team with the Hornets logo or name or anything. Hornets jumped on that as soon as they could. There was one season without a Hornets team in NBA history, and it was 2013. The Hornets jumped on that, and they began designing jerseys. They had a white home, a purple away, and a teal alternate. These are their current threads right now, so if you obviously watch the Charlotte Hornets, you know exactly what jersey I'm talking about. The reason they use teal as the alternates, though, because back in the day, the teal was obviously the away jerseys. They wanted to do this to please fans. Teal, back in the day, nobody really had a purple Hornets jersey. Everyone had teal. And with using the teal as alternate, this gave the ability to use them at home, because teal is actually kind of a home color. It's a lot lighter than purple, obviously. And there's a certain palette that the NBA can use, like the Lakers use yellow at home. I know there's a few other like options of this. I think the Suns use the orange at home a lot, but yeah, that was the reason why they used purple as the away and teal as the alternate. They eliminated pinstripes on the front, but they put them on the sides of the jerseys. A lot of people were upset because there was no pinstripes on these jerseys, but the siding pinstripes included purple, teal, cool gray, and Carolina blue. The Carolina blue obviously was for Carolina, and the gray was obviously just used as an accent color. But these were the first jerseys in NBA history to show the NBA logo on the back above the name. If you didn't know, in 2014-2015, that was the first season that the NBA logo was put onto the back above, and it was replacing a lot of like secondary logos that were put there. The Charlotte Hornets were the first jerseys that actually showed that off. If you look, those jerseys were revealed, then it was revealed that the NBA logo was going to move to the back to make room for advertisements, which kind of sucked, but the Charlotte Hornets actually, they're already pretty much said the only advertisement they're going to have on the jersey is a Jordan logo, which is going to be really awesome. So I'm really happy that Michael Jordan owns the Charlotte Hornets, because those jerseys probably won't change their like sick designs. In 2015, there was one more jersey added, and was the Pride uniform, and these are the Buzz City alternates. It's the first sleeved uniform in Charlotte history and the first black uniform in Charlotte history. The reason it says Buzz City is because Hornets go Buzz. Like, that's pretty much the only reason. It's the Hornet City, you know, Buzz City.
So the Charlotte Hornets, they began in 1988, when they were the Charlotte Hornets, and then later on in the video, we're gonna go all the way to when they were the Bobcats as well. In 1991, the Charlotte Hornets moved to the Central Division, and during the as well in the 90s, they received some really great players. In 1988, Muggsy Bogues joined the Charlotte Hornets, and he would go on to join the Toronto Raptors in 1997. His career was from 1988 all the way till 1997. Larry Johnson, he played for them from 1991 to 2001, and then Alonzo Mourning, he joined from 1993 all the way to 2008. As we transition out of the 1990s, we head into 2004 and 05, when the Charlotte Hornets moved to become the Charlotte Bobcats. The Bobcats were not very successful during those years, and they were only till 2015, if I believe, when they departed and they went back to Charlotte. In 2009, Michael Jordan would go on to own the Bobcats until they moved back to the Charlotte Hornets during that time. Then that's when still today, they're now the Charlotte Hornets still, where they have now received better players.